Предыдущая попытка зависла. Тогда я хотел купить прекрасный, самолет боевой, который мне был как раз нужен. И в этот момент оно все радостно зависло. После апдейта первый раз, собственно, зависло. Апдейт уже долго смотрю. В общем-то, изменений не очень много, по крайней мере, заметных. Что на базе добавилось какие-то новые здания, никаких вообще следов не вижу. Новые существа, да, есть. Новые биомы, собственно, да. Есть кристаллы, которые там в шторм добываются. Что еще нового заметил? Стал показывать теперь на предметах, для чего они могут использоваться. Производственно. Ну, как бы немножко удобно. И, в общем, глобально больше изменений особо не заметил. Ну, то есть, явно больше, видимо, стало разных планет с разными существами-биномами. Но это смотреть, видимо, нужно долго. Зависать, в принципе, стало меньше. Вот за уже часов, не знаю, сколько я играл, часов 6-7. За это время зависло первый раз. На покупке фрегата боевого, который, блин, я до этого долго искал. Полчаса, наверное, больше искал. Соответственно, я описался на планете. Планете не делать еще ничего. Не помню, что. Приземлился, чтобы сканировать, но, в общем, ничего не сканировал. Кстати, вообще это интересно. Если я еще посканировал, будет то же самое, интересно. По-моему, она также сканирует. Первая она подсканировала какой-то там элемент или что-то такое бесполезное. А видео, это я случайно слушал про черные дыры, которые лечат, да, то же самое. Значит, тогда будет тоже. Если что, точно она была первой. Поэтому, бесполезно.
ER and EPR stand for names of people. And on the left-hand side, as you might expect, an E, what does E stand for? E stands for Einstein. Who else could it stand for? Einstein. On the right-hand side, E stands for Einstein.
Слушаем лекцию по
On the left-hand side, R stands for Rosen. Never heard of Rosen. He was just quite
у Чандои был как раз прекрасный файтер.
collaborating with Einstein.
Что вы не дали купить.
So the R's on both sides are the same. And the P in the middle is Podolsky, who was also a good physicist, a real bright mind. The ER on the left-hand side stands for a paper that was written by Einstein and Rosen in 1935. Very much toward the end of Einstein's productive career. In fact, a lot of people until recently would have said it had exceeded his time as an influential physicist. EPR stands for a fundamentally quantum mechanical idea, entanglement. Left-hand side, geometry of black holes in particular. The right-hand side, a fundamental quantum concept of entanglement. And again, it stands for a paper that was written by Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen in the same year, 1935. The two papers apparently had nothing to do with each other. This was usually credited as the paper which recognized the importance of entanglement or recognized the strangeness of entanglement. And the left-hand side had to do with black holes. It has turned out that they are sort of equal signs between them. They are so at the hip. The idea of Einstein-Rosen bridges to entanglements. So I'll tell you about that. And then I'm going to tell you, not tonight, I don't think, about a concept that is developing called computational complexity. The relationship, strangely, the relationship between concepts from computer science and concepts. So that's what this course is about. Okay, let's start with entanglement, though. Now, as I said, this course is for people who have basics, who have learned what we call theoretical minimum. And I am not going to spend time explaining things which So a qubit is like a spin. It can either be up or down, or like a coin. It can be heads or tails. But a quantum mechanical version of it, which can be in superpositions of states. And if you have two qubits, the states are labeled either up or down.
Так, экспедицию будут разместить. Это баланс expedition.
This is an entangled superposition. One of them is up, the
У
other one is
нас
down.
есть все ЦПЦшки.
Minus, down, up. This is called a belt pair, and it stands for the state of a two-qubit system. And it says, very simply, the two-qubit system is such that if the first qubit is up, the second one is definitely down. And if the first one is down, the first is up. There's a correlation between them. If you had these two entangled qubits, incidentally, they could be far apart. You could make the qubit pair, and then take them. Qubit stands for quantum bit. If you made the qubit pair, a bit of information is inside of the computer. If you made the qubit pair, you can take them far apart from each other. And then, because of the structure of this state, you can say there's a correlation. If Bob over here measures his qubit and it's up, he knows instantly that Alice is down. Alice's qubit. If Bob's is down, then he knows that Alice is up. Now that in itself is not so weird. The way I usually like to describe this is give one person a coin, any other person a coin, which is a dime. They don't know which is which. They tell them to go out of the room. We never actually carried this out. The reason we never carried out is because they never have a coin. Okay? Not having a coin is perfectly fine. Still, $10,000. But this is all fair money. So we have here the $10,000 bill. Art, you get one of them, and Sergey gets another one. You know. Okay, so mix them up. Real sugar and chemical sugar. And behind my back, I'm going to give one to Art, one to Sanjay, drop it rather. Then the amazing fact is the minute that Art, the second that Art opens up his package and discovers what it is, he knows instantly what Sanjay's is. How can that be? Well, it doesn't seem very amazing, does it? It's just how it is. That's called correlation. Entanglement is a form of correlation, but in a moment I will tell you what the difference is. It's the state of being correlated for two coins or two bills is really got something to do with the fact that you didn't really know everything about the system that you could have known. That in principle could be known. In particular, somebody could have done a very, very delicate experiment without anybody even recognizing it. For example, by sending into a room a very, very, very low energy radio wave. A radio wave with maybe just a couple of quanta in it, and those quanta might bounce off the objects and record which one was which, without making any difference to the experiment.
Во, кость откуда? Это новая штука, которая почтуется. А я идем искать информацию археологии. Раньше не было какой-то табачек.
system. An entangled state like this is a state in which you know everything about the system that can be known, and yet in this case you know nothing about either of the constituents. That's the notion of entanglement. Now, incidentally, for those who know how to spin, you know you could measure the spin along other axes, not just up and down, but in and out, or left and right. And it has the same property, that if Alice comes along and measures, instead of the upness or downness of this qubit, she measures the inness or outness of it, she will immediately know what Bob's qubit is doing in the same way, with respect to the same thing. She'll know that if she makes a measurement and this qubit is out, then Bob's is in. If this qubit is in, then Bob's is out. So, it's something which is correlation, but it's a much more fundamental concept than just the statistical, or just the fact that you may not have known which one of these I gave to Sanjay, which one I gave to Art. But somebody could have known. So entangled states are very special, and they really do characterize in many ways what is quantum about quantum mechanics. Almost everything that's strange about quantum mechanics is really strange about it. Things which are the really bizarre logic of it traces back to entanglement. Now, can you make macroscopic objects? There's another thing about, let me just say what it is. It has the property that you can find out any piece of information about what Alice is holding by making a measurement on what Bob is holding. This is the character of entanglement. You can find out everything you want to know, or anything you want, not everything, but anything you want to know about what Bob is holding, Alice can find out by measuring her own system, by doing an experiment on her own system. All right, are there macroscopic versions of this? Can you take large-scale objects and entangle them? Or can you create large-scale objects which are entangled in this way? Remember, they have the property that although you know everything about the combined system, you know nothing about its parts, or you cannot know anything about its parts, and you can find out anything about one of them by doing a measurement on the other one. Yes, you can. Here's how you can make a macroscopic system. First question is, how do you make entangled pairs like this? Well, there's an easy way. You just create particle pairs. You can create particle pairs, for example, electron-positron pairs in the laboratory by colliding photons together. All sorts of ways of doing it. When the electrons and the positrons come out, they are entangled. In fact, their spins are entangled in exactly this fashion. So you can easily create pairs of particles that live in this, have this funny relationship between them. So you create a pair. The V here stands for the creation of a pair. One particle goes up one way, the other particle goes up the other way. Well, what do you have? You have two entangled particles separated from each other. And you put them in a box. You put these in a box over here, too. And then you do it again. You create another entangled pair. And now this box has two particles. This box has two particles. And this one is entangled with it. You keep doing it. Keep doing it over and over and over again until you fill these boxes with large numbers of particles. There may be enough of them to create an interesting macroscopic object in each of these boxes. And those objects are fully entangled. They have this property that you can find out anything you want about one of them by doing a measurement on the other. So entanglement is not restricted to small objects. Large-scale objects can be entangled. Now, of course, where we're going is we're going to be talking about black holes.
So it is.
Any questions about entanglement? I would refer you to the lecture notes that I gave on entanglement, and there we are. Now, you might think, in order to have entanglement, you have to have some particles. You have to have something to be entangled. In fact, even just empty space is entangled. To understand how empty space is entangled, the first thing you have to understand, of course, is that in quantum mechanics, empty space has properties. It's not really so empty. You have virtual particles in it. It has fluctuations of the field. Classical physics, the vacuum, the statement nothing in it, the statement of photons, the radiation in it, the electromagnetic field, for example, is just plain zero. It's just plain zero. There is no electromagnetic field. But in quantum mechanics, in the empty space, the field fluctuates. Sometimes you look at it, it could be positive. Sometimes you look at it, it could be negative. Translated into photons, some of the time, a little box someplace. You might find the photon if you look for it, even though we're talking about empty space. Sometimes you would not find the photon. And so if you take empty space and you make measurements on it, you get non-trivial results. Not just zero, but you sometimes find particles, sometimes you don't find the particle. And here's what entanglement has to say about empty space. Let's divide empty space into two halves. I'm using the blackboard to represent empty space. The left side and the right side. And let's divide space into little cells. In particular, I'm interested in cells that are near the boundary. I'm not really doing anything. I'm doing a mathematical, imaginary operation, both in dividing the space down the middle and in making you believe that it's made up of little cells. But now we can do a measurement of
На самом деле я такие же нашел недавно
or we
по
could
обычной
look,
археологической
we could
штуке.
look
4
for a
штуки.
virtual particle.
Копейки,
We could look for one of these vacuum fluctuating particles here,
Так,
and we could look in here. What we find is that if there is no particle on the right side, there will be no particle on the left side. If there is a particle on the right side, there will be a particle on the left side. So we could write the quantum state of these two here by saying if one of them is empty, or zero, and the other one is empty. If we find a particle in it, then we will find another particle in the other one. It's very much hilarious. It's very much like a random state here. You can find out by looking at the left cell here, whether there's a particle here, just by the correlation between them. This is a form of entanglement. It's a form of entanglement that's there in empty space between parts of space. These two cells, are they very close? Yeah, they begin very close. But we can also look at larger ones, a little bit further away.
такого раньше я не помню. Может, тоже новое.
This with this, this with this, this with this, in pretty much the same pattern. And in fact, there's a general pattern that's called scale invariance or conformal invariance. We find that regions are entangled with each other if they're near each other. This one over here is not entangled with this. To make a measurement of a particle in here, you'll find out nothing about this. It's just too far away. But you will find out if there's a particle here, there's probably one here. Same thing in this bigger box here. If there's a particle in here, there's probably one in here. If there's one in here, there's probably one in here, and so forth. So this entanglement, there's a pattern to this entanglement. And it's actually thought, this is a quantum property, but it really is beginning to be thought, I don't know how to describe this, except to say, I think it's so fundamental that it, in a sense, holds space together. We know that if we were to destroy this entanglement can be destroyed. Entanglement can be destroyed by making measurements. There are all sorts of ways of destroying entanglement between systems simply by looking at the system. Once Art looks at his sugar packet, he knows which one it is. And he knows what he has, he now knows what Sanjay has. There's no more entanglement between them. They now know. There's no more, they know what they have. So by looking at the system, Art has changed it into an unentangled state. The same thing can be done in space. You can make an observation of all of these cells here and determine whether there is a particle in them or not, and that destroys the entanglement. It also does something else. It creates a huge amount of energy in the region where you made the experiment. Remember, in quantum mechanics, when you look at something, you change it, you affect it. And in this particular case, if you look at what's in here, you affect the system and you create a huge energy in here. Now, huge energies are sources of gravitational effects. They change the geometry. They change what space actually looks like. And in fact, they disconnect the space. Disconnect the space. They sort of unzip it. Space is zipped together by entanglement. This is one of the things we've learned by thinking about gravity and quantum mechanics at the same time, that entanglement is important, in a sense, for holding the parts of space together. Without it, space would not have its nice coherent structure, its contiguous structure of parts adjacent to other parts. So entanglement is not only a feature of electrons, it's a feature of everything, including empty space. Now, entanglement has another property, which is very important. Monogamy. The same kind of monogamy that I hope you people all enjoy. That I enjoy. Was it's easy to explain. You have 3 qubits. Imagine you have 3 qubits. Alice's qubit, Bob's qubit, and Charlie's qubit. Alice, Bob, and Charlie are important physicists to a Alice, Bob, and Charlie. Each one has a qubit. Actually, Alice, Bob, right. Now, it could be that Alice's qubit and Bob's qubit are entangled. And that means that Alice can look at her qubit and find out information about Bob's. In fact, anything about Bob's qubit, Alice can find out by looking at the appropriate thing for her qubit. They will find out nothing about Charlie's qubit. If Alice and Bob are entangled. On the other hand, it is possible for Alice and Charlie to be entangled. In which case, Bob is the third wheel of the... What do you call it when 3 people have to... yeah. Melange the trois or whatever. A love triangle, right? A love triangle. So, you can only be... Technically, I'm talking about something called maximal entanglement, but let's just call it entanglement. When 2 things are entangled, they are entangled with each other, and they cannot be entangled with a third. That's the monogamy of entanglement. And it's a deep and basic principle of quantum mechanics that entanglement is monogamous. Okay. Now I've actually taught you enough to explain a paradox. The paradox is a very deep paradox. Among physicists, sometimes called the Yepes paradox. Yepes does not stand for a unit of electrical current. It stands for 4 physicists: Bill Barry, graduate student, Orloff, who's now here as a postdoc. Orloff, who's a famous general relativity expert. Polchinski, who's just a famous physicist, and Sully, who was also a graduate student who contributed to the study. They discovered what looked like a very fundamental paradox about black holes and entanglement. So I'll tell you what that paradox is. Start with a black hole. A black hole has a horizon. The black line represents the horizon of the black hole. Inside is the interior of the black hole. Outside is the exterior of the black hole. Interior is inside, exterior is outside. And according to Einstein, according to the general theory of relativity, the horizon is just a point of no return. Things can fall through the horizon. Things can fall through the horizon. When they pass through the horizon, they just find an empty space. Empty space, vacuum. The horizon, or the vicinity of the horizon on both sides, just looks like a continuous space, which both sides are just the opposite side of a vacuum, of empty space. So this means somebody falling into the black hole will simply experience nothing special. Now, but we've already found that if things are like empty space, nevertheless there is this entanglement. Now, these things are not easy to measure. You don't go and measure a vacuum fluctuation with a what do you use to measure things when you want a ruler or a multimeter, right? You gotta be delicate. It's hard to do, but you can do it. So when who do we send into the black hole? This gets to be a question now. Do we send Bob into the black hole or Alice? I usually send Bob into the black hole. I used to send Alice, and then I got a lot of complaints about it. I'm going to send Bob into the black hole. Now, Bob is going to do experiments as he falls through. Maybe he's even going to make an experiment like one of these experiments here. And he ought to find that space, the properties of space, are very, very similar to what they would be in the empty vacuum not really being so empty. So, if that's true, then as he falls through, he might make a measurement of what's going on over here. He might look, for example, for a virtual particle, and then he might also make an experiment over here. And these two experiments, or these two degrees of freedom, should be entangled. Why? Because empty space is entangled in this way. So let's label the things that Bob could measure. Let's call this one B, and this one A. These do not stand for Bob and Alice now. They are just in front of the horizon and behind the horizon. I use B and A because we've been using B and A for a long time. B and A, they don't stand. They could stand for Bob and Alice, but we already agreed that Bob was going into the black hole. So screwed up notation. Bob, no, that's not Bob. That's just a little vacuum fluctuation over here. The other one is a little vacuum fluctuation over here. They ought to be entangled. But let's suppose that for one reason or another, and I'll give you a reason in a moment, that this black hole happens to be entangled, highly entangled, with some other system over here. How could that be? How could it have gotten entangled? Well, let me give you an example. The example that AMPS used was this black hole might have evaporated for a period, and if you collect together all the evaporation products, they will be entangled with the original black hole. But we don't need to do that. We can do it more simply. We could imagine, since we're in the business of Gedanken experiments, thought experiments, and the purpose of thought experiments is to analyze the consistency of principles, we can build these black holes to be entangled in the first place. I showed you a little while ago how you can create two macroscopic objects which are entangled. You simply create them out of material which was entangled to begin with. Particles which individually, this one with this one, this one with this one, were entangled. So you do the same thing. You collect these entangled particles in buckets. Each particle in the left is entangled with something in the right. And then you create enough of them that gravity pulls them together and makes a black hole out of each side. That's something we think should be, in principle, possible. If we do that, what we wind up is with two entangled black holes. Two entangled black holes, Which means everything about this black hole, whatever it is, anything you might want to know about this black hole, you can measure by making this black hole. These two could be arbitrarily far apart. These entangled pairs could have been separated from here to the moon, or from here to, that's not very far, here to Alpha Centauri, or from here to 10 billion light years away. They're still entangled. Right there. You want to know one of them? Okay, so let's do that. Let's assume that somehow these two black holes are the black holes now. So Alice is Alice. Somebody's controlling it. And bombs over here someplace. Now we have a problem. We have a problem because I told you in the beginning that this black hole, everything about it, every little bit of it, is entangled with something in here. But I also told you that for the horizon to make sense, to look like empty space, the things just on this side of the horizon have to be entangled with the things on the other side. And now we have a monogamy problem. The monogamy problem is that B is a bigamist, and bigamy is forbidden, not only by law, but by physical law. So something's wrong. Something's wrong. One possible answer is that if a black hole is created, entangled with another object, it doesn't have to be another black hole, it could be anything. But if it's, in particular, if it's created and entangled with another object, then something happens to the interior of this black hole and wipes it out. Creates nothingness in here. By nothingness, I don't mean empty space. I mean nothing. And that means that if somebody fell into it, they couldn't fall in because there's nothing there. That's called a firewall. The idea, a firewall of the kind, that creates an absolute barrier to where anything could go from outside the black hole to inside. No inside, because if there was an inside, and in particular, if it was possible to pass smoothly through here, as if the horizon was empty space, this would have to be entangled with this. But by assumption, it's entangled with that. So we have this problem, and the conclusion that Amps drew, Mary, Kuczynski, Marolf, and Sully, was that what this means is that if a black hole does, for some reason, become entangled with another system like this, it just doesn't have an inside. There's no inside. On the other hand, everything we knew about general relativity, everything that Einstein taught us, said no. The interior of black holes exist, makes just as much sense as regions of space on the outside, and somebody So this is a paradox. It's a real paradox. It's a genuine one. The solution, I don't think, too many people, including the inventors of the paradox, are at all convinced that their solution is right, the firewall solution, but it's a real paradox. And it's a thing that has driven me for the last 2 years. This is conflicts of principle. This is conflict of principle between Einstein general relativity on the one hand and quantum mechanics on the other hand. Conflicts of principle like this, when they're unraveled, when one understands what's going on, often lead the biggest advances in our understanding of physics. So this can't stay with it. You can't just leave it and say, oh, well, okay, it seems like a paradox. It's really at the core of things, at the core of the relation between gravity and quantum mechanics. Okay, so let's see, what is the possible solution? Talk about possible solutions. How they became, well, we're postulating somehow that B, remember, when a thing is highly entangled like this, and this was created in this very entangled state, you can find out anything about what's going on in this black hole by looking at what's going on in this one, by construction. We constructed it that way. So So we constructed the black hole in such a way that B
Золотого.
is entangled with something in Alice's system here. That means there's something or other that Alice can measure in her system that would tell her about B. On the other hand, if the horizon really is smooth, the horizon really is like space, really is like space, then the properties of quantum field theory, the properties of just the quantum mechanics of empty space, says that B has to be entangled with A.
Некая там еще уже вроде бы, который стреляет.
B is not a black hole. B is just a little bit, it's one of these little cells. It's just one of these little cells that somebody could make a measurement. Just a little piece of empty space. A little piece of empty space. As Bob falls through the horizon, here's the horizon right over here, makes a measurement of whether there's a particle here and then whether there's a particle here. A vacuum particle, a vacuum fluctuation. And those things, in order for the vacuum not to be messed up badly, would have to be covered with an entangle. That's what we learned by understanding quantum field. Okay, so if the horizon is what we always thought a horizon was, just a point of no return, but not in itself some sort of terrible environment, then this little region of space over here has to be entangled with this little region of space over here. On the other hand, by construction, everything about this black hole was entangled with something in Alice's system over here, which could be another black hole.
Что за сруженка?
B can't be entangled with both because of the monogamy property. A is behind the horizon, and in our current understanding about thinking of black holes, basic quantum state is composed out of things outside the horizon, and the interior is built in some other way. But you might just say that everything about this black hole, including B, has to be entangled with something here, and therefore how can it be entangled with A? Now, there's one way. These are bits of information. They're logical bits, if you like. They're logical possibilities. You can say, does A have a particle in it, or doesn't A have a particle in it? But you can just say, it's like an abstract bit of information. Could it possibly be? What's that? Which one have to be the left side one, if this weren't a black hole, we wouldn't be talking about its interior. We wouldn't be talking about its horizon. The belief. Sorry, what makes the black hole different than what? Yeah. Say, for example, supposing this was just empty space. This has to be correlated with that. Being so present. But supposing we knew that this empty space was also entangled with something over here. The answer indeed would be, if we knew that this was entangled with something over here, then we would know that it wasn't entangled with this, and we would expect a message, a terrible message here, which would not look like it. We would have to do it. It's very, very difficult to unentangle these two things here. It's a puzzle for black holes because black holes have horizons, and horizons are supposed to be smooth. The more we ever learned about black holes, they're supposed to have these smooth horizons. If we took just a chunk of matter and we did this, we'd probably make a big mess out of it over here, which is exactly what we don't want to do for the black hole. So the question is one possible answer is what the AMP said, that a black hole, which is entangled with another thing, develops properties which are very different than what Einstein said black holes are like. Now remember, one way of entangling the black hole with something else is just to let it evaporate for a while. Black holes evaporate, Hawking radiation. As they evaporate, incidentally, this is something that any system will do. It will eventually evaporate. It could be a puddle of water. A puddle of water, H2O, will also evaporate. Let's suppose it's completely isolated in outer space, a little puddle of water, and little droplets will go off. The little droplets will be entangled with the puddle. As the puddle shrinks, it will become entangled with the outgoing products of evaporation. Eventually, when there's enough evaporation product out there, the bubble here will be highly entangled with what's out here. So the way that Amps imagined it, they imagined this object over here was really just Hawking radiation. Now you could take that Hawking radiation and collapse it into a black hole. This will be entangled. It would just actually be entangled there with radiation, and different parts of here would not be entangled the way you might have expected. Just be true. But there's no such thing as a horizon. There's no reason to think that there ought to be a horizon. So it only comes up as a crisis when you think about black holes. Again, it could simply mean that the black hole doesn't have material. Nobody wanted to believe that. I think very few people do believe that the black hole doesn't have material. Certainly violates the principle of equivalence, of Einstein. And so the question is there no other way out? There's no way that this somehow could be misleading. Well, there's one way out. As I said, these are logical qubits. These are logical bits of information. And a logical bit of information over here, which is the thing we call A, which is supposed to be entangled with a logical bit of information over here, despite the fact that the logical bit of information over here is entangled with something else that's given another name, B prime. B and B prime are entangled. We built the thing that way. B is supposed to be entangled with A, but there's something wrong. There is one way out, and that's that A and B prime are the same thing. A and B prime really are the same thing. Is that possible? Is that completely nuts? Amps said that's too crazy. They're too far away. This object could be off an Alpha Centauri, this black hole, let's say on Earth, and the thing which is right behind the horizon over here is clearly near Earth. It's not near Alpha Centauri. So it doesn't really make sense to say that A is really the same object that's out here. But they also had a experiment that they imagined. Here's the idea. The idea is that a bit of information just behind the horizon here is really the same bit of information as over here. Okay, so here when various people said this and said maybe this is what's going on, the answer of Amps was very, very clear. They said, no, that's complete nonsense. And here's the way to prove that it's nonsense. Supposing A really was the same as B prime, and B prime is off on Alpha Centauri. Well, Alice, who was at this end, could make a disturbance of B prime. She could measure something in B prime. Measuring things disturbs them. So by Alice manipulating...
Как-то, наверное, слушаешь и играешь.
Ну, как-то так, мультизадачность.
А тебя никто не смотрит?
Ну, не знаю, может, смотрит. Поговорить.
Ты на ночь будешь стримить?
А?
Ты на ночь будешь стримить?
Нет, сейчас никто не смотрит. Конечно, кто-то смотрит.
Я тебя давно хотел спросить.
На ютубе там смотрят.
Тебе сегодня, я тебе снился сегодня?
Нет.
Тебе ничего сегодня не снилось?
Не, ну что снился, я просто не помню уже.
Мне сегодня приснился ВОЗ, где ты меня разбудил и увел в ВОЗ.
Мгм.
Ты меня там учил, как выходить из окон, вылетать.
Мгм. Круто. Ну, я такого не запомнил. Я такого не запомнил.
Ну это было в 5 часов ночи.
Мгм. Так, цвет. Платно лаунчер. Бэшка, кажется, не интересует. Класс уже есть. Нет, либо Ашка хотя бы, либо СК.
The B prime, which is in this black hole someplace, the thing which is entangled with B, by measuring it, right, first of all, she has found out something about B, but by assumption, she has effectively measured
Кстати, это
something
я,
just
по-моему,
behind
его же
the
использую.
horizon of the
Да.
black hole.
Во.
Well, that's crazy,
Ну,
because by
потом, наверное,
making a
сам качается.
measurement of something, you disturb it,
Ну ладно.
and the result would be a disturbance just behind the horizon of the black hole. Amp said, and the disturbance means some energy deposited there. Some energy deposited there by the measurement. Anytime you
Блин, у нас
measure
такой будет на
something,
базе.
you
Угодно.
tend
А,
to
ну
change
сейчас
its energy.
вызовем.
So by measuring what was out here, you made a disturbance over here. Well, how crazy. One of them is off on Alpha Centauri, the other is over here. Can't be right. I'd say one of two things. By measuring what's out here, perhaps it could be part of behind here. But that's, as I said, that's a little bit crazy. That's too far away. So if there was a particle behind there, as a consequence of Alice doing something over here, that particle must have been there whether or not Alice made a disturbance. She's just too far away from it. So the conclusion was that there must be loads of particles behind here, one for each possible measurement that Alice could possibly do on this thing. That's what was called a firewall, and that was the basic paradox. That was the unhappy paradox that Amps concocted. There was one assumption here, and it seems so obvious that it was obvious.
Так, ты такого на
Namely,
складе.
that there's no causal
Будем
connection.
искать.
No causal connection between this black hole or the environment of this black hole. I draw a little bubble over here to indicate the thing connected with this black hole. That there's no causal connection between the bits of this black hole and the things which are behind the horizon over here. In other words, there's no causal connection is a way of disturbing things over here that will show up over here. And that seemed obvious to everybody, except it seems that it's wrong. It seems that it's wrong, and to understand why it's wrong, we need to think about the other half of the EPR, ER connection. This was all about entanglement in the context of black holes and a puzzle about entanglement. The other paper from 1935 had nothing to do with quantum mechanics. It had to do with the geometry of the interiors of black holes. ER invented something called an Einstein-Rosen bridge. I don't think they called it an Einstein-Rosen bridge. It was called Einstein-Rosen bridge afterwards.
Mm.
And what they did was they looked at the mathematical solution of Einstein's equations that, I don't know how they managed to look at the Kruskal solution, well, before Kruskal was born, I'm not sure, but somehow they did. And they knew enough about general relativity, Einstein was pretty good at general relativity.
Кстати, интересно, могу здесь сделать там коридор, например?
But
эффект.
For those who know what a Kruskal black hole is, it's basically a black hole. I'm going to draw the Penrose diagram of it. Now here we're coming to things that I'm going to assume we know a little bit about, but I'll explain a little bit as we go along. That's a space-time picture, time going up as usual,
Почему здесь такая херня?
space going horizontal. It's a space-time map of a black hole. Let me explain it here. On these kind of diagrams, light moves at 45 degrees. Light moves 45 degrees in the outward of it. If you're out here, this is spatial infinity, spatial infinity. When I say it's a map of space and time, it's a distorted space. It's distorted the same way.
Так, собственно, я закончил с базой. Знаешь, как? Я хотел купить. Уже так даже.
This is time infinity. Clocks go to infinity up here. Here's the horizon of the black hole, and here's the exterior of the black hole. The only thing we should notice is that if some poor person happens to fall through this line here, they are trapped. This is the singularity of the black hole, and it's a bad place. It's a place where you won't survive. This is the horizon of the black hole. If you fall through there from the exterior region, you're dead. You're doomed. Anyway, you may not be dead, but you're doomed. You don't get that singularity there. Now, this is the exterior of the black hole, but strangely, the black hole seems to have two exteriors. One on this side and one on this side, and you can fall through from this side and that side. It's really two black holes. It's a black hole on this side, and it's a black hole on this side. They're in a certain sense infinitely far away from each other. You can't go around from one side to the
О,
other.
видите, это прекрасно.
You'll never get there. Here's a picture of what this Kruskal extension, and in what sense it's two black holes. It really represents two disconnected regions of space, completely disconnected. Here's a region of space, or a space. That stands for space. Not space-time, but space. X. That's the right side. The left side, another region of space. And connecting them, you can go from one to the other by passing through something that John Wheeler called a wormhole. When you walk from here to here, right through that point, you walk through the horizon of one, and you show up just outside the
Короче,
horizon of
видите,
the other.
этот
That's over here.
штука.
There's the horizon. So, falling in, or crossing over, not falling in, but crossing over from here to here, crossing from here to here. Einstein and Rosen drew this picture. Somebody called it an Einstein-Rosen bridge, and it stood for this diagram over here. It's two completely disconnected worlds that are only connected by virtue of this world. It's a real solution to Einstein's equations. It exists mathematically. It has some properties.
Причем дырка слишком сложная.
Region over here.
Сказать, что нафиг зашел.
Терминал не работает. Кого ноль?
I've been tutoring for the Open University for about 9 years. It's a very sort of minor academic role, but it gives me a lot of latitude because I work at home all the time. And so I can get involved with all this crazy stuff. My original background's in software engineering, which is basically computer programming that you get involved with design. So I have had to to analyse a lot of information very quickly, make sense of it, and come up with a solution. That's what I've had to do in the past. I also, part of my degree was in physics, and I did a degree in computer science and physics, so my interest in energy technologies and the physics that goes along with that stems from those times when I did physics at university. I don't have any advanced degrees. I don't know anybody with access to classified information. I don't know anyone in the military. Basically, I don't know anything. So you don't believe what I'm saying. Just check this all out for yourself. Pardon? Common sense, exactly. You don't know who I am really. I've told you who I am, but I could be lying. So check it out. Just a note about today, I've got to leave this afternoon, so I'm not going to be, I don't know if there's a panel tonight or not, I'm not going to be on the panel. It's not a conspiracy to keep me quiet. I've got to go back and go and sort of look after my family and so on, so that's what I'm doing this afternoon. And I'm going to hopefully go through this.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwanted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizen can condemn the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Today's solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by Tesla in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the Free University, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every new blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of the scientific, technological elite.
So, President Eisenhower in 1961, some people say the last great president of the USA. Look at what happened to the president who came over. I think he knew stuff. He knew that he wasn't really commander-in-chief. He knew that there was another group which was running things. And I suppose the question I'd like to put to you, for you to think about, is does the group which Eisenhower was essentially referring to reach right to the heart of this very conference? Maybe it does. I'm probably going to skip over some things. I've got a lot of material here. I do have this presentation on DVD. You can watch it on my website, checktheevidence.com. Most of my DVDs are now gone. If you was for a box of different DVDs here over this weekend, those are the DVDs that I produce, the ones that were €1. The booklets for €1. I made all of them myself in my own fair hands. But I think they've all gone now. But if you do want DVDs, I will send them out. There's leaflets downstairs, so take the leaflet, checktheevidence.com, post them out internationally. So I make all the information available freely as I can, as cheaply as I can, and I give it away to people who want it. Yeah, censored. Not really, it's all pretty much there, I'm going to look at some things that I'm probably going to skip skip over some things, because I know these have already been covered by other speakers here. I put this presentation together about 2 years ago, most of it. So, what do we mean by infinite energy or free energy? What some people said about free energy devices. We'll look at Tesla reproductions, or one Tesla reproduction by a chap called Carl Paulson. It's a very interesting YouTube video. I'll mention Wilhelm Reich, who a lot of people talk about orgonite stuff. We've got people here with orgonite stuff, or I think we did on Saturday, here again today. They don't talk about Wilhelm Reich that much. Key figure. Dr. Eugene Malov, Stephen E. Jones, Cold Fusion, we're going to mention that. That was in Dr. Wood's presentation yesterday. I've got a very similar clip, just like different, but I want to re-emphasise that because it's hugely important. I'm going to mention John Hutchins' experiments, water-powered vehicles, again being covered a little bit, Bedini motors, Bruce De Palma and the End Machine, that's a very big one, very important. We'll look at the deaths of inventors. I'm going to look at Dr. Stephen Greer and his energy projects. Oh yes. And we're now, by the time we get to the end, I think it should be fairly clear to you why we do not have free energy at the moment. And unless we become alert and knowledgeable citizens, as Eisenhower said, we're not going to get free energy. We have to be alert and knowledgeable about some very uncomfortable things. And I think maybe for some people, that process started yesterday afternoon in one of the talks. Free energy is impossible, of course, as we know. There is no such thing as a free lunch, really, these common expressions. In other words, I'm using the expression that if you were to go and have a conversation outside this room, these are the sorts of statements which will be made back to you. It breaks the first law of thermodynamics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Heat and mechanical work being mutually convertible. If someone had created a free energy device, they'd be a billionaire. That's the common one. We all want free energy, so therefore it must be, the most commercially marketable thing in the universe. So therefore, why haven't we got it? If you had a device that you could run your house on, forever for no money, you'd sell them $1 million a day till everyone got one. So therefore, because we haven't got that situation, free energy doesn't exist. It's a simple question of logic, is it not? Perpetual motion is impossible. When no one has demonstrated a device which produces more energy and is put into it, it's fed into it in some form. That's what people will say. So those are the sorts of things. Oh really? As you know, this is not true. Over unity, what's that? You hear that come across this term, over unity, what does it mean? It simply means that you get out more energy than you put in. It comes from when you divide the amount of energy output by the amount of energy input, and you end up with a figure greater than 1. In physics elsewhere, unity is another name for 1. It doesn't just mean what people are trying to do to the truthful. It is confused with perpetual motion because the idea is that when you connect an over unity device's output to its input, then it will run itself. So that's why people then sort of, cross-reference this idea of over unity and perpetual motion machine. So you can't have a perpetual motion machine. But I'm going to start off with some ancient history really, and this was mentioned I think in Murray King's talk. The Faraday Hermopolar generator. Michael Faraday was a fellow of the Royal Society, and he died in 1867. He was an English chemist and physicist who studied the magnetic field around a conductor carrying a DC electric current and established the basis for the magnetic field concept in physics. He discovered electromagnetic induction, diamagnetism, and the laws of electrolysis. Electrolysis is the breakdown by electricity of a solution. Substance. Michael Faraday did an experiment on December 26, 1831, in which he co-rotated a magnet with a copper disc and measured the current output. And this is sort of a version of this on the bottom here. Even though he'd done an experiment, his own law of induction tended to ignore the results of this experiment. His own law couldn't explain what was seen in this experiment. Known for 150 years, the operation of the Faraday homopolar generator, whose current generation could not be properly explained, the world then later embraced Faraday's two-piece induction generator, whose drawbacks include mechanical friction and electrical losses, and that eventually became the current electric motor and also the type of generator that we use. And the rest is history. So this homopolar generator was one of these curiosities of physics which no one had really studied that much. And then, of course, I'm not going to talk that much about Tesla because there's tons and tons of stuff out there about Tesla. One day, man will connect his apparatus to the very wheelwork of the universe, and the very forces that motivate the planets in their orbits and cause them to rotate will rotate his own machinery. Tesla's experiments showed that there was a radiant energy field present everywhere. It just needed the right equipment to extract this energy, and sometimes you needed to put the energy into a system to make the radiant energy visible. In other words, the energy is all around us. It's like, simple windmill. You don't know until you build a windmill that you can actually extract energy from the wind, but the wind has always been there. It's been there for, since the Earth was formed. Or the atmosphere was formed, perhaps, I should rightly say. And Niagara Falls famously used generators which were originally designed by Tesla, and there's this story that when they first hooked these things up, they got this huge sort of back EMF, and it blew out some of the equipment, because they just weren't expecting them to work like this. There was some anomalous energy production from within these which they weren't expecting. Now, again, it's been one of these expressions when you start to look into these free energy inventions and so on, and you really start to try and take all the information in, it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much stuff out there. One of the ones that I came across originally in the 1990s in a Channel 4 documentary, which I'm going to play a clip from later on, was James Griggs's hydrosonic pump. And as in common with many other devices, this has high-speed rotating components, and it's basically, you can see here, part of the hydrosonic pump is like a flywheel that's got holes drilled into it. And you rotate this flywheel inside a drum, an enclosed drum, and the spindle of the flywheel, you squirt water through it, and then the centrifugal force sucks out the water into the gap between the drum and the end of the flywheel, and it has this effect of generating heat. And there's some effect which goes on, and the pump is then 125% efficient, because you get 25% more heat energy out than the electrical energy which goes into it. And this was taken apart by physicists, and no one believed it, and blah blah blah, but it was developed into a commercially available product, one of the few things that to be developed into a commercially available product. I think it's still available, but I've not checked recently. Magnetic sync circuit. Wilbert Smith designed a circuit to extract energy from the Earth's magnetic field. Wilbert Smith, I've got a whole presentation about this guy, a remarkable chap. Very few people have heard of him. And he became the superintendent of radio regulations in Canada, and he got in touch with aliens, basically. Or he didn't call them aliens, he called them boys topside. Very, very compelling story of Wilbert Smith. He also touched on free energy topics, essentially. And then I think yesterday, in one of the presentations on Friday, I think mentioned Schauberg's Repulsi, quite a well documented device, which was funded by the Nazis, and some say it was developed into the Nazi Saucer program. I'm not so sure about that myself, but some interesting bits and pieces there too. Okay, I'm just going to play this clip of Nick Cole, former James Defence Weekly journalist. I think it's still watching. Maybe I'll just skip over this. Nick Cole described an anti-gravity effect and zero-point free energy field that seemed to be interwoven. He's not the first person to do this. He was one of the first people I heard connect this in the way that he did, and it was very interesting to me because he was a defence journalist. Free energy or anomalous energy effects seem to pop out from devices that are spinning very quickly or having spinning components at high speed greater typically than speed light, such as 20,000 revolutions per minute. In a typical car engine you might get up to sort of 13,000 revs in some of these Formula 1 cars. But to see these effects coming out, you need to go a good bit higher. Wilbert Smith did an experiment with a rotating disc at this sort of spin as well. Devices using a very high voltages, greater than 50,000 volts, you get these effects popping out. Using strong magnetic fields, you get effects popping out. And high frequency defects coming out of these systems. And there's loads, hundreds, thousands. And I'm just going to show you an example here. This isn't a free energy experiment particularly, but it's a reproduction of one of Tesla's experiments, and the point I want to show you is that this is a different type of electricity which is being shown in this experiment. And what we're going to see is essentially the 100-watt bulb held underwater being illuminated.
Good afternoon. I'm going to show you a few things that Tesla does.
He goes into a bit of a description of music while the experiment
page 134, figure 19. You'll see the circuit right here. And also the same circuit can be found in his book, The Innovations, Research, and Writings of Nikola Tesla. And this book here is found in several places. The one we're going to be demonstrating today will be on figure 183. Also, I've gained some information from Jerry Vasilato's book, Lost Science, and his other book, Secrets of Cold War Technology. Both are invaluable. Here you'll see my setup. It's 2 copper rods connected across the top with another copper rod that is on a slidable scale. I can slide it up and down. I have lowered it from the higher position today just so you can see it on the film. My camera's not quite tall enough to catch the whole thing, but it's slides up and down. It's just 2 parallel bars of copper. The bottom of there's capacitors, just like he says in his book. And the spark outlet in the front here are only 10,000 volt transformer at the back. And I'm connecting light bulbs across the bars on these 2 slidable lights. All one way slidable. All light bulbs are 110 volt bulbs. The only little bulb will be this bulb right here, which is a 12 volt light bulb. That's for out of an automobile type bulb. And this fluorescent tube here, I don't think it has a voltage rating on it. And we also have this big fluorescent tube over here. So I'll turn the machine on now. Arc is quite loud, so I won't be talking during this part of the demonstration.
The bottom of this video appears to have been cut off because it's the aspect ratio of the screen is wrong, so you can't see the spark gap at the bottom. Just below this bottom thing, there's another spark going. And you've seen some, this is very similar to what the chap downstairs has got with his experiment. He doesn't do the underwater bit, which is coming up in a minute. So you can go and have a go with this downstairs if you haven't already seen it. Have a go with that. Something like it's very similar to this.
Что ставим, собственно? Это стали искать. Так что уже вспомнил.
This is some of the type of energy that we're dealing with. Looks like electricity,
О, кстати, нам нужен этот самый сульфид.
This experiment's probably over 100 years old. So if that's what you could do, you know, just on your bench top, what can the military-industrial complex do?
Hi.
I believe so, yeah. Carl Clausness is, I think if you Google that name, it was there last time I looked, which was a while ago. There's a few people who have done similar things. You'll find similar reproductions. They've gone back to Tesla's original notes and reproduced exactly how he described building the experiment. Carl Clausness is one of those. He's got quite a bit of copper there, and that's quite expensive, so you're probably looking at a couple of $100 just for the copper in that rig that he had. Euros, I should say, euros. Correct. Yeah, exactly. Right, so I want to touch on Wilhelm Reich. He doesn't seem to get an awful lot of airtime, and I'll mention him again in a bit. He discovered a form of energy called orgone. It seems to be the energy from which everything else is made. So, again, is it another form of etheric energy, zero-point energy, vacuum energy? It has all these different names, but it appears to be something underlying the fabric of our reality. Reich also studied this in relation to human sexuality. That's where he got into it. This is quite unusual thing that not people seem to mention, because he works as an assistant to Sigmund Freud. That's where he came across this idea that some interaction between humans in their relationships was this energy, he called it energy. And he constructed and conducted experiments with what were called orgone accumulators. That was eventually his downfall, actually. And Dr. Eugene Mallard believed that current physics, based on quantum mechanics and relativity, was almost completely wrong. He became interested in Wilhelm Reich's work, following his examination of working orgone accumulators. That's what Mallard, he became very interested in Reich. Prior to that, he had no interest. I think I've got a clip of him describing this. And Mallard started to work in the early 1990s to develop cold fusion and other free energy technologies for general use, because Mallard's story is worth getting his book Fire from Ice. If you can get hold of a copy of that, that will give you the whole full Monty on this. He basically realised that the university that he worked for was committing science fraud in an attempt to debunk cold fusion. So he left and thought, right, cold fusion's real, or low energy nuclear reactions as it should be called, and he needed to get it developed, so he took it upon himself to do it, because he knew the university was going to do it. And he worked for, he had a science doctorate in environmental sciences from Harvard. He worked for high technology engineering companies such as Hughes Research Labs and MIT Lincoln Laboratory, which I believe is where Thomas Townsend Brown was as well. And he was the chief science writer at MIT News Office when cold fusion erupted. I've got a clip of him mentioning that, I think. I've got a couple of clips of Mallard. So this is him talking about orgone accumulators. I'll just let him speak and you can look at the picture and read the text at your own pace.
Wilhelm Reich, the brilliant man that he was, an unusual man, because remember, he did come out of a sexual psychiatric orientation, right?
Yes.
Right, so who is some person like that to say anything about physics?
Right.
Well, in 1941, the brilliant fellow that he was, he brought some interesting observations to Einstein. He actually had 4.5 hours with Einstein. And by the way, this meeting is virtually absent from all accounts of the biography of Einstein.
Why?
Because Reich was later disparaged. He died in prison.
Okay.
He turned into, just like cold fusion, an insane, pathological man.
Do you think Einstein took some ideas from him?
No, not at all. Einstein, he asked Professor Einstein, a colleague, of course, in the fight against fascism. Remember, this was early 1941, before the United States got into the war.
Right.
Of course, both of them were opposed to the Nazis, obviously, and well aware of the possibility surface of what we call a Faraday cage, a steel enclosure, was higher, and remained higher throughout the day, than a similar auger suspended in air. Okay, now this sounds, your listeners, even who don't know about this, may say, well, that sounds crazy. What could that possibly show? Well, careful experiments by Dr. Paulo and Alexandra Correa in Canada confirming this type of experiment, and in fact, giving it an even worse bias against being seen. In other words, not having the orgone accumulating the layers of material around the Faraday cage, just using bare steel boxes, so to speak, in their laboratory, they have found persisting, round-the-clock, elevated temperatures on the metal Faraday cage, even in a darkened room. Now, when I first saw their ether motors and their PhD, okay, I was obviously motivated to go back and study Reich. Prior to that, I had no interest in Reich. But I wondered, well, God, I mean, could Einstein have missed in 1941 a profound discovery? And the answer is absolutely yes. We covered this in our issue 37. He brought it to Einstein. Einstein confirmed that there was a 30 degree or more elevation on the Faraday cage. But in poo-pooed it. He did some half-baked experiments to suggest that, oh yes, the simple explanation as to why this elevated temperature is there, and he pushed Einstein away from thinking about it, and thus broke the connection, the critical connection between Einstein and Reich. If had persisted, Einstein had behaved himself and continued to cause Reich did write papers, technical letters to Einstein, pleading with him to reevaluate the assertions, the glib assertions of Leopold Infeld.
So Reich knew Einstein. He was right, they were right up there with the top minds of the day. He was right up there with the top minds of the day. Now, all of Reich's books were burned. The only scientists whose books were burned by the people in the USA. And any mention of Auger had been expunged from the literature, according to what I read. So Reich was one of the key figures, and obviously, just to mention a little bit about the cloudbusters, for example, that Reich developed cloudbusters, which a lot of people who looked at chemtrails are familiar with. So there's various areas, and to say the orgonite, which accumulates water energy, can have health benefits. Reich essentially proved that. Essentially proved that by treating people. People came back to it because they were having beneficial effects. And again, Reich is somebody that's worth looking into and reading up on if you haven't already done that. And then, of course, we come to this man. I've basically got another audio clip here. This is me and John Hutchison when I spoke to him in 2008. And there's a whole story behind that. I've got a whole DVD about that interview from 2008 with Dr. Judy. So I'll just play this clip. You've obviously been playing with this for a long time. I know you've been through the wars, at various times with having your equipment confiscated and things like this. I believe that's happened at least twice. Is that correct?
No, main time was 1990 when I was in Europe. It was the Canadian government that took the entire laboratory and tried to make a secret operation, but newspapers found out about it, published the news.
Okay.
And that was that had been raided before in 2000.
Okay. And one of the things that we wanted to just check with you, that I believe it was in 1983. There was a person called John Alexander, Colonel John Alexander, in fact, who'd come to see you because he'd learned about what you were doing. I wondered if you could sort of mention a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. Colonel John Alexander was 1983. He came with a team from Los Alamos, and he said to me that we're expecting a threat from, as I recall it, a threat from the Soviet Union.
Okay.
And that was a concern for the American government. So I gave a demonstration for about 4 months working with the team. And unfortunately, there were some effects that happened, and sometimes it didn't. It seemed like the equipment was sabotaged, and I learned from yet another lieutenant colonel that a fellow by the name of Bob sabotaged the entire project. So John Alexander was a little upset over that, and he brought in another team from McDonnell Douglas to do a clear, not classified report, which I still have that report. And then after that, of course, the Canadian government did their experiments and kept it a matter of national security.
Of course. Now, I think that's, really interesting that we do know that people in the military are well aware of what you've been doing. It's not as if you have been, working away totally like a hermit. They're fully aware of what you've been doing. And we understand one of the key things is that in many cases, when you start your experiments, you can switch off the power, and the effect that you're generating will continue.
Well, we're trying to do a parallel here, I believe, and when I switch out the equipment, sometimes there's metal samples that have been analyzed by the Max Planck Institute that seem to be accelerated in time, ahead in time.
Wow.
And crystalline structures are always changing very fast, and the magnetic properties are changing extremely fast. So this is in regards to when I basically shut down the power, these samples, which are many of them, tend to alter. Ongoing, the energy in the equipment has been measured at 100 to 400 watts. I was giving a demonstration for Maine News. The newscaster accidentally chopped the extension cord in half by accident and shut down the entire lab. So that's around 400 watts, the lowest power. And if I'm using more modern equipment, of course, I'm up to maybe 1,000 watts energy to drive the systems. And the mayor of the city came here, and he compared to them talking with the friendly fellow there, right, out of Westminster. And he was talking about these big reports of concrete cracking up, as well as citizens in distress. And it seems when I do an experiment like I did for National Geographic TV and film, blew out the elevator, so they couldn't get their equipment down after the experiment. And just recently, Fox TV is doing an experiment, and then some plumbing exploded downstairs. But I take in consideration too that when I was doing the McDonnell Douglas experiments, we had a water main explode out in the street. So that's written up in some of the text. It's been through a lot of mischief.
I think one point I wanted to just dwell on for a second is that, Judy and I, we watch the internet forums quite closely, and there are quite a number of people who are saying, John Hutchison can't reproduce the effects which he's, makes. And I wonder, what your response would be. I almost feel silly asking the question, but,
I think they honestly, I think they don't listen to radio or watch TV or read books, because I've been doing this quite regularly for Fox TV in 2000 and onward up for Griffin Productions, as well as National Geographic TV and film, and onward with many, many different crews have come and gone out of here, and I can sit down, turn everything on, and guarantee an effect within 5 minutes. So whatever they're reading is maybe so old that they just don't bother researching. That's what I feel.
As you saw in Dr. Judy's presentation, if you were here, there is a very definite connection between what happened on 9/11 and what happened with John Hutchison's in John Hutchison's experiments. And again, it's to do with this underlying energy, some type of 0-point energy, some type of energy which is fundamental to the structure of matter. And since 1979, John has been doing experiments trying initially to reproduce the work of Nikola Tesla. And he was using what are called electrostatic fields, which is static fields are like when you take off a nylon jumper or you stroke a cat and you get this electrical charge building up. That's electrostatics. And he interacts that with magnetic fields and microwaves from microwave generators and from RF generators, radio frequency generators, using these in various combinations, various frequencies, various cycles them up and down. And when when he starts to do this in the region of interference, he produces effects such as the jellification of metal turning to jelly, with almost little or no heat, or even cooling down in that process. Bending and fracturing of metal. Lift, levitation and disintegration, so if samples will fly up in the air, things even have disappeared. Transmutation, which is one element changing into another, one metal changing into another, which Dr. Wood touched on in her presentation. Fuming of samples, but it's not necessarily smoke that's coming off. And disappearance, as I said. Fusing of dissimilar materials, again you saw this with Dr. Wood's presentation, where you've got the sample of metal and wood melding together, but without heat. So what's going on? Now I'm going to play, hopefully this clip will play, this clip of Pons and Fleischmann, which is similar to the clip that Dr. Wood played in her presentation. And this is hugely important to the history of the energy cover-up, hugely important because basically, without reading out all the text, this is when the concept of free energy started to really get into the heart of the academic community. And they had to pull out all the stops to stamp out this fire. It became very serious because it lasted for a period of 2 years. And I became very interested in trying to make that effect. When I got my first internet connection in 1996, one of the first things I did research on was UFOs. So I did research. And it turns out these two things are connected, the energy issue and the UFO issue, which I'll get to later. Pons and Fleischmann did an experiment. It was basically, they were chemists, okay, and they did an experiment what's called electrolysis. Electrolysis is a method where you pass electricity through a solution, and it breaks down that solution into different compounds, different elements, and so on, and different components. And they found with this particular solution that they used, which was lithium hydroxide and deuterated water. That's heavy water. It's got water with extra neutrons and extra particles in the nuclei of the water molecules. They observed that under certain conditions and at certain times, but it wasn't 100% repeatable, they could maybe put 100 watts of power in, and then when they did measurements, they were getting 200 watts of power out. And then there was all kind of a massive outcry over this, because they were saying that they were detecting elements of a nuclear reaction. Primarily, as John Bockris explained, the clip that Dr. Wood showed, and the clip that I had, something called tritium. Tritium is only produced in a nuclear reaction. You can't produce tritium in a chemical reaction because of the nature of the material. Tritium is an isotope of hydrogen. It's a hydrogen nucleus, which is a single proton with 2 extra neutrons. Right, and I'm giving you a bit of a lesson in sort of nuclear physics, but it's the only way to explain it, really. And they also got what's called transmutation. So after several years of research into this, and this was primarily done by other people as well as later, really, although Pons and Fleischmann, I believe, did get some transmutation. They start off with a palladium electrode, and then they find that it had copper in it, it had zinc in it, embedded in the electrode. Where did this copper and zinc come from? So they said that, you know, the samples got contaminated, you know, that somebody had actually put in the material to contaminate the samples deliberately, there was fraud and so on. And so this whole, you know, this raged in the academic community for 2 years because it looked, there were reproductions, some universities reproduced it, and they were able to get what's called the excess heat. In other words, when you get excess heat, it means you get more energy coming out than going in, and this breaks the laws of thermodynamics. And John Bockris in that clip yesterday, if you saw him, he said, we're breaking the laws of physics, and because we're chemists, the physicists don't like that. When a chemist comes along and says, we've done fusion in a test tube or in a beaker, they'll say, get lost. You can only do that with a huge, expensive $20 billion project, which you know needs plasma physics. It needs a huge, expensive reactor called a tokamak reactor, and so forth. You can't do it in a beaker for $200. You know, no way. It's just, and I know because I'm a physicist and I know everything. So you must be wrong. But then you find, for example, somebody like Stephen E. Jones comes along. Stephen E. Thermite Jones, for anyone that's done any 9/11 research. His mate, my mate, Thermite, Marmite, Thermite Jones. He comes along and says, actually, folks, and I was describing this to somebody this morning, I've done an experiment with cold fusion as well, and it's called muon catalyzed cold fusion. And I found that, yeah, it's really quite an interesting effect. You can get this energy, excess energy, but actually you can never use it, because my experiment has proved that you're never going to be able to get the energy and use it in a machine to drive a generator or something like that. No, my experiments show you can't do that. But what Jones was really saying is, and I was describing this to somebody, like Pons and Fleischmann, they'd say built an electric motor and got some energy out of it. And Jones would say built a petrol engine, so that his petrol engine didn't work, and because his was an engine and theirs was an engine, and he could never get energy out of his engine, their engine wouldn't work, even though theirs was an electric one and his was a petrol one. It was a totally different system that Pons and Fleischmann had, but yet Jones steps up to the plate, he finds himself as an authority, and then, as Dr. Wood had in her presentation, takes this vote on cold fusion. So this went on in the academic community in the 1980s and into the 1990s, and as I say, Dr. Eugene Manoff was one of the prime movers in this, and you're going to see what happened to him before too long. And Jones then appears on the 9/11 truth scene in 2005, just after the NIST technical reports about the destruction of the World Trade Center. So that's when somebody sent me a link that this Jones character was involved in cold fusion, which I wasn't aware of until 2006. Then we knew, and this is one of the central things, I think it should be one of the central things of this whole conference, the 9/11 issue and the energy issue were deeply connected. And somebody here was arguing, I think, that, it doesn't really matter, we know that the Al-Qaeda story is not true, so that's what we need to agree on. No, that's not the key issue. The key issue is to understand that 9/11 was of free energy, demonstration of free energy technology.
Oops.
Itself is quite a mysterious and powerful substance. Given enough time, it can erode steel. It is composed from hydrogen and oxygen, two of the most reactive elements on Earth. Science has also known for over 200 years how to extract hydrogen and oxygen gas from water through the process of electrolysis. It was from this field of electrochemistry and not nuclear physics that there emerged a revolutionary idea of fire from water. In the 1980s, Fleischmann and Pons used their own money to conduct experiments for 5 years.
Так,
They passed a
чуть
current through
металла
an
и
electrochemical cell containing
процесса.
heavy water, or deuterium oxide. One of the electrodes, the negatively charged cathode, was made of the precious metal palladium.
Процесс нужно.
The electrical current separated individual deuterium nuclei, or deuterons, from the heavy water and forced them to pack tightly into the palladium cathode. What happened next inside the palladium at the atomic level remains a mystery and became the subject of intense debate. Whether it was actual nuclear fusion or some other as yet unknown phenomenon, the result produced far more excess heat energy than any known chemical reaction. Why is such a phenomenon so astonishing? Why did it provoke such outrage in the physics community? To most classically trained physicists, the concept of low-level nuclear reactions producing significant heat energy was inconceivable.
It was a very unfortunate time to make such an announcement for various political reasons, really. The situation in the United States, the situation with regard to the program of hot fusion. So that was against it. But also, of course, was the fact that we were not ready to make such an announcement. The criticism of pathological science is one which has quite frequently been leveled at unusual investigations, which admittedly sometimes are at fault. However, there is also the situation that people will criticize a field long after they should really have given up. And that is pathological criticism. They just get trapped in a situation. They have made a criticism. They have to maintain that criticism against all the evidence.
At Texas A&M, a group led by Professor John Bockris, who is widely regarded as one of the world's greatest electrochemists, reported finding the hydrogen isotope tritium, a key signature that some unusual nuclear reaction was going on.
The first thing was this thing called tritium, which is a sub-form of hydrogen which doesn't exist except in extremely tiny quantities. We found that by working these cells of Fleischmann ponds that contain lithium hydroxide and deuterium oxide, we could produce this tritium in great abundance.
Так, дальше написано, вообще сложно. А вот файна тис. Тритиум, тонна тритиума. Жесть. Хлорина и соли. Натриниум, хлорин и соль. Мне нужны две. И соль. Так, поздно.
Let's say at 10,000 times more than it ought to be there, as it were. And let me stress that we couldn't do it every time, but about one result in 5, or one result in 4, and eventually we worked up to 2 results out of 3. We could produce tritium. That was the first thing, and in a way it was the first clear proof of the phenomenon.
At Texas A&M, Bockris' group found themselves under attack. Science magazine writer Gary Tobbs wrote a stinging article that insinuated that someone in the group had spiked the samples with tritium. Although unfounded and eventually proved untrue, the allegation effectively dampened Bockris' remarkable claims.
Well, I was 69 years old at that time. I took the attitude. Suppose they're fine? Well, it doesn't really matter. I had my career. The worst they could do would be to say, go 10 years old. And therefore I wasn't frightened. And I went on saying the truth, publishing what they caused. But finally the university revolted against this. They set up an inquiry, as they called it, rather sinisterly. The accusation was that I had carried out misconduct of research. You see, I shouldn't have worked on these things. They decided that the accusations were totally groundless and they published all this. But then they started all again. About 6 months later, they had another committee. It was this time. When my lawyers asked the university what the second inquiry was about, they were told, it's an ad hoc committee. What's that? We have nothing further to tell you. So this went on for 11 months of constant meetings and inquiries and so on. And I'm quite sure that they were trying to find an excuse to end my tenure. So finally they came out okay. They gave me another letter. I had the letter of complete exoneration. This time it said that I had to spend the 7 months and have found that I had never done anything, the phrase used were that contravened the rules of procedure of this university, something rather formal, stuffy like that. But I think the main part was that I had done work which was against the paradigm. That was what they really
А, что, не дают турецкие издания?
You know, people said that they've been to other universities and people had laughed at it.
Это были издания.
What the heck are you doing, trying to disprove the laws of nuclear physics? Of course, that's exactly what we were doing. And succeeding, you see.
Even though positive results were still coming in, the Department of Energy's negative report effectively killed congressional funding in the United States. Fleischmann and Pons later packed their bags and left for France to carry on private research sponsored by the Toyota Corporation.
By 1992, we had video recordings of intense energy release. By the summer of 1994, devastating sustained energy release. Then, of course, you can say you want to bridge things into the device, required for research. And we were always working on the time frame of 2000. And I believe the resources had been available. We would have gotten the year to the probably before the year 2000.
Yet as early as 1992, cold fusion experimenters began reporting unusual appearances of trace amounts of different metals such as copper, silver, chromium, and zinc when examining their spent cells. Rechecking for possible contamination, scientists like Bacchus and Riley confirmed that indeed new metals and isotopes were being formed, transmuted, during the process which produces excess heat.
Many metals, many obsolete research results, as early as 92, to these transmutations of metal forming another metal inside. The electrons, of course, super anti-paradigm. You know, there's that dreadful word alchemy, I suppose. It was a form of that, as it were. It was creating new metals.
In Japan, Tadayoshi Omori and Tadehiko Mizuru at Hokkaido University have produced volumes of data from rigorously designed experiments showing the production of metals ranging from iron to platinum and beyond. The Omori cell using a tungsten cathode has consistently produced excess energy along with measurable amounts of transmuted metal.
So that's a very quick summary of the story of cold fusion. Yes, it was reproduced many times and has been since those times, but it takes expensive equipment to do it. It's not something you can do in your garden shed. It's not a reliable, 100% reliable process, but it does work. And you think if you could transmute one metal into another, what if they really can turn lead into gold in large quantities? I'm going to say, we've got Stephen E. Jones talking about cold fusion.
Since Pons and Fleischmann were both well aware of the pitfalls of premature publicity, why would they bypass the accepted conventions of the peer review system and announce their discovery through the media?
I was thinking these guys are no fool. They know what they're doing. These are good scientists.
Prior to the 1989 announcement, Stephen E. Jones, a physics professor at nearby Brigham Young University, learned of Pons and Fleischmann's work through an informant of the DOE. In a flagrant example of shameless opportunism, Jones insisted on going public with his comparatively much less clear results. Disparaging the excess heat claims of Fleischmann and Pons, Jones' announcement would have effectively prevented the two scientists from patenting their process, a process they had developed on their own over long years of research.
So Jones was essentially responsible for killing cold fusion. He's one of the main people. It wasn't just him. So he has been responsible. For example, I posted an article when Fukushima happened last year. We don't need nuclear energy. this can be developed into a source of energy. I would contend that black projects have got this energy, something like this. Somebody like Stephen E. Jones, he's essentially at least partly responsible for things like Fukushima happening. So just think about it.
Is it a shortcut to fusion energy? I don't want to disappoint anyone. I think I'll put my read my lips answer here, and then on carry on. I think that'll become clear why I'm saying that. Can you read my lips on that back in the back? It says no. Energy is a long way off, that's why I say no, this is our result. Way off, that's why I say no, this is our result. Way off, that's why I say no, this is our result. Way off, that's why I say no, this is our result.
So he said you couldn't get energy from cold fusion, and everyone then went along with his statement. He heard it everywhere, and that's exactly what he did with the 9/11 Truth Movement starting in 2006. And I was one of the sheep in that herd at that time. I've written about that in my book, 9/11 Finding the Truth. So it seems the whole affair at Stage 4 was stage managed from start to finish. They knew early on that they were going to need to manage it should it come out into the wider arena. The goal was to trash and debunk the science, and you can see this if you read Dr. Eugene Mallott's book, Fire from Ice. You can see the pattern emerging in that book, and it seems that a whole array of skeptics and debunkers were wheeled out to stomp out the fire. It was the first time the phrase pathological science was brought into general use. And I spoke to somebody a few months ago, oh, cold fusion's never been reproduced. What he really meant was, I'm not aware of any of the reproductions. There are hundreds of reproductions, you can go and look them up in the scientific literature. And I put some booklets on the table yesterday with some information about that. They've all gone now, but you can get them from my website. Please look at the website, checktheevidence.com, or contact me afterwards if you're wanting more information and you don't get time to ask me a question or whatever. Please do that. But it's difficult to reliably reproduce cold fusion, and some of these energy experiments have the same problems. It's not easy to make them work reliably. And then to engineer them into a device, that's a whole other issue, which I'll mention a bit later on. But different reproductions of cold fusion, some have just produced the excess heat, and less evidence of like neutron emission or neutron activation. Some do get the evidence of neutrons, and transmutation is not always seen either. You get various combinations of these things appearing or not appearing. So now we're going to switch to another very important one, which is Bruce DePalma and the N machine. This is a kind of a derivative of the homopolar generator, which was I mentioned at the beginning. DePalma studied electrical engineering at Harvard from 1958 and taught physics at MIT for 15 years. Working under Harold Eugene Edgerton, he was also employed by Edwin H. Land of Polaroid, the camera company. He is the brother of Hollywood film director Brian De Palma, who produced that film Carrie, the very scary film with a very shock ending, if you remember it. It's a very scary film. In his study of inertia, he developed a kind of rotating magnetized gyroscope. That's perhaps what I would call it. It's not exactly that, but it's kind of a bit like that. And this he called the N machine. I've got a clip here.
Right now we have the entrenched energy monopolies and cartels. You know, we have OPEC and we have the 7 sister oil companies to control all the oil and energy. But what people have to understand is that the people who run the energy business in this world, which is the biggest business on the planet, earning over $4 to $5 trillion a year, it's bigger than guns and drugs, it's bigger than defense. They control the newspapers, they control the governments. But these companies are so big that they regulate the government, which regulates them. In 1977, Bruce DePalma unveiled the first prototype of the N machine, an electrical generator which uses rotating magnets to generate up to 5 times more power than it takes to drive it. I know about the fact that the Japanese government and the Indian government have ongoing projects to produce N machines for domestic power. My partner is Paramahamsa Tiwari, who is the director of the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, which operates all the nuclear plants in India.
In the late 70s, I learned from Bruce DePalma that he had carried out certain crucial experiments by rotating electromagnets
Tawari tested a prototype based on the Parmesan machine under laboratory conditions. The results were deemed too impressive, causing disbelief and suspicion among conservative government officials and the power consortiums that backed the project. Tawari was forced to abandon the project completely. One of the pivotal people that I encountered early in my career was a conventional astronaut. Edgar J. Mitchell, an Apollo mission astronaut, founded the Noetics Institute in Southern California. The institute's charter was supposedly to develop alternative energy systems by attracting inventors from all over the country. Mitchell became extremely interested in De Palma's end machine. He made De Palma a paltry offer to buy out the invention, which De Palma naturally refused. He said to me that if I ever tried anything on my own in California, I would get my head blown off. So I was scared to death. The CIA operates through various very innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent than a benign institute founded on transcendental principles to help new age...
Weather warning. Incoming storm.
Так, штуки на основном. Можно ТНТ.
Into the world. And that situation still exists in the United States today, where a person that really understands what's going on just can't get their idea out because the alternative science and medical fields have been co-opted by the intelligence services.
And he converted this little engine to run on water. This is many, many years ago. And he used it for several years. And somehow the news got out, and one day he got visitors, and he was told to dump the engine or else. 3 weeks later, the man was dead. The coroner's finding was that he fell off the back of a train. He was drunk. Well, it happened that he didn't drink.
There is no progressive science in a world where every scientific idea is evaluated for its military potential.
Power, or energy, and control of energy equals power. The new world order that is emerging. If you control the energy, the way we get around, the way we get electricity, the way we have our TVs and video cameras, if you do the control of the energy, then you've got control of the people.
Actually pretty much covered all of it. Control the energy, control the people. And as Bruce De Palma said, and we're going to come back to this, what about setting up a group based on transcendental principles to bring free energy to the world? We're going to come back to that. So, Bruce De Palma himself, I mean, he does have a website, and I suggest you go and read it, brucedeparma.com. There's some very interesting emails and stuff that you can download between him and Adam Trombley, I'm going to mention in a minute, about this whole business with the End Machine. Now, if you go and read various web pages about the End Machine, you'll come up with some interesting things. For example, Bruce De Palma died in I think it was 1997, which again I'll mention a bit later. This was not a surprise, his death, considering the condition I had seen Bruce in when I visited him in December 1993. Bruce began each day upon arising, sometime before noon, with fine wine mixed with sparkling water. Years of alcohol and substance abuse finally took its toll. The mystique and the enigma that encircled the life of Bruce De Palma was due in part to the fact that he was never able to prove his theories with a working over-unity device. Oh really? Oh really? So why on earth would Edgar Mitchell go to him and say, if you go around doing this in Southern California, you're going to get your head blown off? I'm going to increase the pace a bit now, probably, to get through all of this. Here's another one, not an end machine. Let's have a look at this one.
To another good idea, and imagine a machine that could power your house for free. Well, that's exactly what two Australian inventors claim they've developed. Using magnets and a battery, their new generator has been described as revolutionary, and foreign investors are lining up for a piece of the action. Chris Alvarez.
So, John, this is the machine?
Yes, this is it, Chris.
What's it capable of?
Well, it'll power a house. This machine will provide sufficient electricity to run a house and have power to burn.
It sounds too good to be true, but inventor John Christie is convinced his machine will change the world. So, John, basically you're saying this machine can produce 5 times as much power as it consumes?
Yes, it does. This one, exactly as we see it, it does. And in fact, it can produce more than that.
Once kick-started from a battery, John and his partner Lou Britt say this prototype will run for years without stopping, generating 24 kilowatts of power a day.
You don't get more revolutionary, I think. I mean, we're talking about something that has the capacity to change the way that the world produces its electric power. It has the capacity to change the way that motors and cars are propelled. It can replace the combustion engine, in fact.
John, these are big claims. Are you sure you can live up to them?
We don't really need to live up to them, Chris. What the technology speaks for itself.
I mean, a householder could buy one of these machines and install it in his garage and power his house forever without buying another kilowatt from a retailer. I mean, that's how serious it is.
Steve Brassington is an independent electrical engineer. He's seen the machine and backs up everything John says.
It's revolutionary, and that's the only way to describe. I think the technology is not bending physics, it's just using principles that I guess are commonly in use in power generation today in a different way. These guys have thought outside of the square.
Basically, it's magnetic attraction and magnetic repulsion that provide the movement or the moment of the motor.
Can you understand why some scientists are skeptical about it?
There is no physicist or engineer who has looked at our motor or has looked at our figures who says it doesn't work.
Lou is an electrician and John a businessman in Cairns in far north Queensland. The two unlikely inventors have been tinkering with their machine for 6 years. They've applied for an international patent and have been swamped by people wanting a piece of the action.
These are the coils. You mentioned the coils don't get hot.
Local businessman Alex Roma is one of the many offering money to help develop the generator.
If it proves up to be what they're saying is, it certainly would be something I'd invest in.
John has also spoken to billionaire inventor George Lewin, the man who came up with the Trident workbench, and who's now setting up a fund to stop Australian inventions going overseas.
There's an opportunity here, I think, to share an invention with the world that is beyond anything that we've ever contemplated before.
Scientists here at the local university say while they're interested in John's machine, they're also cautious. They say if the machine can generate as much power as John says it can, then they will have to rewrite some of the laws of physics, and they've urged people to be cautious about investing in it until the generator has been independently tested.
Anybody who says it doesn't work hasn't seen it or hasn't looked at our figures, they haven't reviewed it. If they look at it, they all agree with us that it doesn't work.
John says the household generator should be available in a year and sell for about $5,000. If he's right, it will make him much more.
And how much do you think the technology could be worth?
I have absolutely no idea. Yes, very definitely talking millions of dollars, but I'd hesitate to estimate it.
mention of Adam Trombley's closed-path homopolar generator. This was actually quite similar to the end machine. And again, something you can look at. Let's see. I'm going to read out what Bruce Palmer wrote about the Trombley device. Thus, that although Adam Trombley, the senior designer of the machine, has received 2 written gag orders from the Pentagon Department of Defense forbidding him to reveal the details of the machine upon threat of 10 years imprisonment for violating security relating to the homopolar generator design through the very nature of life itself by a totally automatic process, the attached document falls into the public domain. So this document wasn't supposed to come out, but it did. This is Adam Trombley's device, similar to the N machine, and it had, let's see, I think a 4.92 power gain of the machine. You got out 5 times more power than you put in. But it was taken away. His device was confiscated. He was hassled. He's still around. They didn't kill him off. We're beginning to see a pattern emerging here, hopefully, with this, and it will go on. Now, let's see. Yeah, I can probably. Yeah, I'm going to play this now. Bedini Motors, another. This is not claimed to be over Unity, but I've got. This video is in 2 parts. It's about 10 minutes long, and I'm playing a lot of video clips, but it's a good way to deliver the information. This Bedini motor has actually been developed into a commercial product called the Renaissance Battery Recharger. There's another section to this video which isn't the original Bedini motor. It's a Bedini motor and a reproduction. It's basically a special type of motor where magnets are used in opposition. You have a north pole pointing at a north pole rather than the conventional motor where you go north-south. And it captures a radiant pulse.
Because as the system operates, it also captures and delivers usable energy.
We had a little trigger signal from this battery over here, and that starts the motor, which we're going to do right now. And if you come around to this side over here, you see over here, we'll slow it down a little bit. Here is magnetic trigger. Trigger signal into these coils, and once we get the trigger signal in there, then what we can do is we can, each time this triggers, turns on and turns off, we can collect the charges that would normally be wasted, and of course they go into these banks over here, these capacitor banks, and then this is a timing mechanism here, which is timed to be about once every second and a half or so, and makes contact here after we collect the charges. And then these capacitors here are dumped through this electronic switch here, and you can actually see the dump here. You watch it, and it'll bounce up when it dumps. So if we slow it down a little bit so you can see it. See, it's bouncing around here each time that dumps down. The capacitor bank discharges into this battery, so this battery is going up. As this mechanism triggers here, these are coils. Okay, so the first thing that happens is it wants to repel the magnet like you see it doing here. Okay, it's because it's true. But these are tripolar wound coils, meaning that they work like a transformer, but it's not exactly a transformer because they're one-to-one. So the only thing that can go through this transformer is the radiant spike. And the radiant spike is collected in these condensers. And if we put the meter on it here, so you can watch energy from the vacuum in the chemical process.
Oh,
and converts it to something that's usable at a later time. In other words, it's a triggering mechanism. You have to trigger your circuits to produce a radiant spike, and then the radiant spike, when it hits the chemical action, sucks the energy from the vacuum. And that's what's charging the battery, breaks it up. After radiant charger charges batteries, it's a little more difficult to charge with a conventional charger. Takes a longer time after that. So there is an alteration that takes place from using this form of energy that takes place in the chemical composition of the cells. You know, and once it's attuned to this way of charging, the battery accepts the radiant charger much faster each time. Higher power density output each time. So a 33 amp hour battery might look like a 65 amp hour battery. The difference is radiance, one form of energy, EM as we use today, you know, electromotive force energy, isn't capable of charging this sulfated battery because it sees nothing. It sees an infinite resistance. Okay? Radiant energy doesn't, being that the energy is like 100 times or 200 times what the sulfation process is. Here, look at it again. Now it's brighter. See? And it'll keep doing that. The sulfation will come right off the plates. And the battery will become a pretty good battery again. You can see here that there's 8 magnets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're all north pole. There is no south pole. This motor does not switch back.
Right.
It is, and it's an attraction motor, it's not a repulsion motor. So every time that it's attracted in, it fires like a magnet. Then the electronic circuitry decides to fire, but see, it's out of range when it fires. It's at like 23 degrees after. So when it fires this field, the field is big, it pulls in the next magnet, and it repeats the same process. So we want to do this as quickly as possible. So you see one pole here, one pole here, one pole here, one pole here, one pole down here, one pole down here, and we want them all to fire at the same time. So if you look, all the magnets are lined up to fire at the same time in this direction, and then when the motor moves over here, all of them are lined up to fire in this direction. Once we do that, this is what we can do. Then we got a self-pulsing motor.
Это, наверное, это у нас роботов. Роботы. Хотя, что там? Да, скажет,
Good day, decided to use the name for this particular experiment as Daft Man,
Почту.
because I must be daft getting involved with this kind of thing in the first place. But after seeing a few videos on YouTube, I started to get a bit inquisitive and decided to go on, I'll have a go at let's see what all this idea, whether it works or not. So here we go. I've actually got two coils. I don't think you can actually see that. 22 SWG, 26 SWG, and a 28 SWG, 500 turns. That's 500 turns, bipolar. I think that's what you refer to it as. On that coil, and the same on that coil. Now, as you can obviously see from what I've said and what I've just said, I've got three tapped ports. One is the actual port, one would be the trigger circuit, and one is the generation circuit. But obviously the trigger circuit also generates power as well. Same with that coil there, exactly the same as what I've just described. Underneath, I don't really want to tip it up, but underneath, I don't know if you can actually see that, there's some magnets flying around, there's just tripping reed switches. So the only difference with mine is you've probably seen that capacitor at the back and wondering what that's for. Right, well the first motor, which is the drive motor, which is what I refer to it as, so for clarity, actually drives the output of those go down into the bridge rectifier up here, which then goes off and charges that capacitor. Put my finger too close to that spot, which then goes into the second trigger circuit, which is on that board at the back, that triggers that motor. So the output of the two generation sides of that motor go into the rectifier, charge that capacitor, triggers the second circuit, then I tap the output of the second circuit into the next bridge rectifier, which then charges this battery. This battery's just been off charge this morning. It was about, I don't know, I think about 9-10 volts, and it's now charging.
Так,
It's now charging. I've got to push this on quickly later. I had to overcharge it very slightly. It went to 14 volts a few minutes ago. Here you can see 1381 there. The supply battery is 1198 solid, and that's the current it's actually using at the moment. So, there's no reason why it would speed up a little bit and slow down a little bit. I'm assuming it's when the capacitor starts using up the current. If it just seems to do this sometimes, I don't know why, but something that look at it, maybe it's just a bearing that starts where overheated and been repair. God, it's covered me for months now, I couldn't stop the sense. I have actually got an electric circuit that I normally have on this that switches the battery over. This one comes down to about 8 volts. It switches over to the next battery that swaps the charge over at the same time. It just keeps swapping battery flip-flopping if you like, and keeps the whole thing running. The problem is if you let the batteries run too low, and I've noticed this, if I let this battery here run down to about 2 volts, and then put a fully charged battery on before I normally repair at the back there, and I let them charge up, I find that it doesn't charge that battery back up from it. So over a period of time, the whole thing comes to a grinding halt. If I reset the voltage detection of the switch circuit to detect the voltage dropped at about 8 volts, and then the thing will just run for months. I've actually had to stop it in there because it's just been it running back in the shed. So it's actually been running for many months. And I've only just finally plugged up courage to put it on YouTube if you like.
So that's a lovely chap from Northling that I don't know who he is. The key concept, or the key thing in that video, the first one, John Bedini, he was just charging one battery and then taking the battery off and charging another battery and just running the motor off that. That Daft Man, as he called himself, he'd put in an expert circuit produce this, it's great that can be used in the electrolysis process. That's the thing, this has been measured. And Stan Meyer, he got international patents in several countries, demonstrated multiple times over. Several people have reproduced this.
Well, it was during the oil embargo of the United States. It alarmed me that a little country over in the Far East could actually cripple the United States. And realizing that the entire industrial base of the United States and the world is based on the supply and utilization of energy, it became imperative that we must try to bring in an alternate fuel source and do it very quickly. Of course, I thought originally with the right type of funding, we could possibly get it in within 6 months, but reality shows that the 12, 15 years was more correct in this projection.
Back in the 70s, Stan Meyer set out single-handedly to solve America's energy problems. He decided to do it using water, the world's most abundant storehouse of hydrogen, which is a far more powerful fuel than oil. For 15 years, Meyer has been fighting to get his inventions taken seriously.
Most inventors have to be a loner. You have to be somewhat thick-skinned and don't rely on other people to support you, because they will not. More times than not, an invention is really stolen from the inventors. Even in my prior development of high technology, I've had patents taken from me. I've learned from the School of Hard Knocks to be very cautious.
Meyer has always stood out against the crowd. He has no formal qualifications as a scientist because he didn't wait to graduate from high school, leaving early to go straight into research at the high-powered Battelle Institute in his native Ohio. Now he works full-time as a private inventor to build a device with potentially revolutionary implications. There is nothing startling about a machine that can extract the hydrogen from water. What is highly unusual is that it should do so with ordinary tap water. The conventional method is called electrolysis. Meyer has turned that process on its head. And like electrolysis, his device doesn't use up large amounts of electric current, nor does it produce an enormous amount of waste heat. For 20 years, he has been refining a method to fracture water, which produces vast amounts of hydrogen on demand. This is not his latest apparatus. He was unwilling to let us point a camera at that. This is the simple device he used to convince a reluctant patent office that his revolutionary concept actually works. Alloy rods, acting as electrodes, are housed in a perspex container that's filled with water. Normal mains voltage is fed in through a transformer. Critically, there is virtually no current consumed, less than half an amp. The result is dramatic. Hydrogen pours off with the flick of a switch. Meyer claims the key is his electronics, which pulses electricity rapidly across the rods at up to 20,000 cycles per second. In a way that's not readily apparent, this process transforms the equation. Whereas in conventional electrolysis, 3 times as much energy is consumed as is produced in the form of hydrogen fuel, Meyer's apparatus, the reverse is true. It appears to produce several 100% more energy than it consumes.
Stan has something that's characteristic of the people that sound like they've done something to tell zero-point energy. Has high frequency, high voltage, and there's a combination of the two in which something occurs. With Chernetsky in Russia, it was what he called a self-sustaining discharge. The tube would run by itself. When Stan gets this effect, the amount of hydrogen and oxygen that are emitted off these two electrodes is a step function. It almost boils the water. If I did this with standard electrochemicals, I need current, and the water should rise a degree every couple of seconds. With Stan's, it'll run for a half hour, and the water temperature hasn't changed. Something's different.
Meyer demonstrates this repeatedly without any difficulty, and yet on the face of it, it represents an extraordinary revolution. His measurements over the years suggest 1,700% greater efficiency than conventional electrolysis. And if he's to be believed, he's getting much better results from his latest, still secret invention.
Well, I first got involved with Stan Meyer when I went over there with a couple of colleagues to look at his water-splitting device. So we arrived at Stanley nightmare. He had a demonstration cell. We filled it with tap water. In fact, I did that myself. And he switched it on, and almost instantly, the 3 jaws dropped because of the rate at which the gas poured off. It was quite spectacular.
Whatever energy source Stan Meyer had tapped, it was not explicable by the electric power that was going into it. So something was powering it outside of conventional wisdom.
There is no question that the gas coming off in such abundance is hydrogen. Meyer ignites it to produce a high-temperature flame able to cut through metal.
Stanley Meyer has faced lots of difficulties. He's 3 times tried to launch the device, produced press conferences, and the technical press round, but he's been almost universally slated. In the early days, very much so, they just ridiculed the whole idea. He's getting a little more notice now because some scientists are getting interested, but by and large, science is very intolerant, particularly modern science.
As with Tesla, Griggs and others, Meyer's claims are so far outside the received scientific wisdom that they've been ignored by the majority of the scientific establishment. But then, Meyer has ignored them too. He has poured his energies over the last 10 years into establishing recognition for his claims by getting international patents.
In the processing, there was a great deal of difficulty in trying to process the legal paperwork in such a way as to allow the patent office to fully understand what was actually occurring. In one instant, we brought the water fuel cell to Washington, D.C., and of course I had tweaked it in such a way to produce an enormous amount of hydrogen oxygen gas, and the patent examiner said, no, it will not work based on the electrolysis process. And when we turned it on and produced an enormous amount of hydrogen gas, the examiner finally realized that we were doing exactly that, and went out in the hallway and started screaming and hollering to everybody on the floor, put out all your cigarettes, hydrogen's in the building. So we started laughing and said, well, we certainly convinced everybody in the patent office that we could do what we said we could do.
Even so, the US Patent Office dragged their feet for 3 years before granting patents on the hydrogen-producing device. Since then, against massive resistance, he's managed to get patents established throughout Europe and Japan. But the hydrogen machine was only the first step towards Meyer's ultimate dream. If he gets it right, this application of his technology will change the 21st century in the same way that the Wright brothers and Carl Benz transformed the 20th. He is currently modifying a beach buggy to run on nothing but water. It doesn't have a petrol tank or even a hydrogen container. It has just a tank of water. He's invented a device called a water splitter to replace the spark plug. As the water is injected into the engine, Meyer claims it's fractured into hydrogen and oxygen, and then burned as fuel. Meyer is working on a kit to modify any engine. He hopes to demonstrate it on this car within 12 months.
And of course, the blessing to the use of the water as a fuel source, that on combustion, the byproduct is water mist. So we're even solving the environmental pollution problem at the same time, and we're using water to maintain the industrial basis of the world.
Meyer is protective about his inventions to the point of self-confessed paranoia. Most observers describe him as a crank, and his car as an aberration. If only a fraction of what Meyer claims for his technology can be achieved, it would represent a vindication for NASA's involvement. It would also be a powerful threat to many entrenched vested interests.
If Stan Meyer's device works like he advertises, you would make energy available universally, almost free. That is a major, major, major impact.
When new technology comes into existence, there's a great resistance to it because it can affect a lot of economic factors. In this particular case in the United States, we pay out roughly about $200 billion a year for foreign oil. It's quite obvious that the Arabs would pay $200 billion to try to keep this type of technology out of the economy. And many times over the last decade, I have been offered enormous amounts of money to simply sell out or to sit on it. The Arabs offered me well over $1 billion cold cash, simply to sit on and do absolutely nothing with it.
Oh.
My life has been threatened many times. Of course, I happen to believe in the power of angels. And if I don't believe in the power of angels, I don't believe I'll be around here too long.
story of all. Oil, gas, coal mining prospecting at huge, expensive operations. Vested interests are enormous. Everyone needs energy, even governments of the world need energy, and the military need energy. Even medium to large-scale use of more conventional technologies, such as the basic electric car, bringing in conventional battery technology, seem to have been terminated as early as possible. If you watch the film Who Killed the Electric Car, you'll see that story laid out in 50 minutes. That's available on YouTube. The other video with John Bockus and so on is called Fire from Water. That's 50 minutes as well. Fire from Water, the one that John Bockus was in earlier on. And the narrator was James Doohan, Scotty from Star Trek. It's a very worthwhile 50 minutes of your lives about watching that video, Fire from Water. Very worthwhile. So, what did Eugene Malleth think about this?
The academic government complex, not the military-industrial complex, as much as the academic government complex, is against new scientific ideas that threaten the foundations of their work. And they, no matter how many papers are published, I don't care whether they're on the internet or not on the internet or where they are, the establishment academic government complex is brain dead.
Yeah. I mean, why can't they open their arms and say, this is exciting, let's try it, let's experiment, and let's jump in it?
Well, it's remarkable. I must tell you, George, 15 years, almost 15 years now, after that fateful day of March 23rd, 1989, I continue to evolve in my understanding of the emotional and psychological and intellectual armoring, to borrow a term from the famous Wilhelm Reich, that scientists have. It's astounding. One physicist at MIT, whose name is Dr. Hermann Feshbach, one of the world's foremost nuclear physics people. Now he's deceased. But at MIT, as I was finishing up my time there as a senior person in the MIT news office as a science journalist, he had played a role in getting rid of a major article that was going to appear in the MIT magazine, a very influential magazine called Technology Review. It's on newsstands all over the place. He said to me, I've had 50 years of experience with physics. I know what's possible, what's not possible. And then that was it. That was his total statement, which I would cite forever as a statement, a kind of statement that should never come out of the mouth of any person who considers themselves a legitimate scientist. They're not a scientist if they say, based on previous knowledge and theory that I have, I know for all time what is possible and what's not. That's obviously crazy.
So this goes back to the scientific community just not wanting to accept the idea of free energy because they're so sure it can't be real. That's what Malleth experienced. It doesn't matter about what the data shows. It can't be real. Now, another of the people who's meant to be coming to this conference was Tom Below, Dr. Tom Below. He worked at the US Patent Office, and in a 2001 email to Gary Vesterman, he has stated, as a former patent examiner, I can tell you that the number of securitized patents in the vault of the Patent Office, Park 5 building, is closer to 4,000 or more. They never receive a patent number, and the inventor is rarely, if ever, compensated by the government for the use of the invention. The US Patent Office has a 9-member committee that screens patents for national security implications. A hidden purpose of this committee is to also screen the energy-related patents which could threaten the power and fossil fuel companies. So now we begin to see how it starts to work. So if you have a free energy invention, don't get it patented. So let's just go back to that Bruce De Palma clip, shall we? The CIA operates through various innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent than a benign institute founded on transcendental principles to help New Age inventors bring free energy into the world. If free energy technology was not real, these operations would not be needed. And Edgar Mitchell was involved with this. Yes, the same Edgar Mitchell who was the sixth man not to walk on the moon. How is it that the US now has no manned space program? And they went to the moon six times in the 1960s and 70s. When they launched the new moon missions on the 100th anniversary of powered flight in 2004, they said that the next moon trip was going to be 20 years away. And there is now no manned US program. It's a little bit like the John Searle flying disc, supposed flying disc technology, which was built apparently in the 1970s, but they have no flying disc now. Quite reminiscent of the Apollo program, to me at least. I've shown that clip already. It's a very brief clip. Okay, so what about these transcendental movements? Well, let's have a look, shall we? Just a little bit of background. How I came to be in this strange position of being here today in front of this wonderful audience and at this wonderful event that's been organised with such skill and professionalism. It's a very strange thing for me to be here, really. But I got involved with this in 2003 when I discovered something called the Disclosure Project. Dr. Greer's Disclosure Project, which is basically about the UFO cover-up, and you can read about that on the website, disclosureproject.org. And basically, I got involved with that because in 2003 I knew there was a cover-up relating to the UFO stuff. And this, when you get into this field, you have to start to get into this stuff. You have to start looking at the idea of aliens and ETs and flying saucers. If you don't, really, to me, you're being dishonest, because it's all interrelated. And I think what I'm going to show you essentially proves that. Now, I won't give too much detail about the Disclosure Project, but Greer got together a lot of witnesses from the military and high-up and civilian organisations such as the FAA and so on, and he made a press conference in 2001 at the National Press Conference Club, a very prestigious venue. And these witnesses were swearing before Congress. They'd, been involved with UFO-related projects, black projects. They developed certain bits of technology and so on, or they had very significant sightings which were then covered up, such as the Japan Airlines case, such as Robert Salas's case, where he was in charge of nuclear missiles and they were shut down when objects came over the silo above ground. But then Steve Greer in 2001 said the reason why, this was the big light bulb to me, the reason why there is a UFO cover-up is not really about the aliens and the ETs, it's about energy. When you realise that these craft really are coming here in certain times and landing and doing things, and they've been observed and filmed and photographed, physical evidence taken, and that stuff is all there if you want to go and look for it. Yeah, there's hoaxes as well, of course, just like there's hoax-free energy devices. When you realise that that is the truth, then you're going to think, what do these craft run on? How are they powered? What powers them? Is it coal? Is it gas? Is it nuclear fusion? No, something else. Something else. They've been able to engineer the underlying fabric of whatever it is that everything else is made of to extract energy. Now, so Greer, this was Greer's point. He made that point, this press conference. He said, right, I'm going to form Seas Power, SEAS Power.com. Okay? And that stood for, he said, it's like a little pun, it's a little pun. Space Energy Access Systems Power. And if you went onto that website, it contained an example, for example, an agreement for inventors to sign if they had a device they were working on and they wanted to develop and market it. Because Greer's goal was, he said, what we need to do is get this free energy out of the world. So what we do is we get the investors and we get the inventors together, we make an agreement, we develop a marketing strategy, and boom, then we get the device out and we've got free energy. Fantastic. I thought, top man. What a guy. What a brave guy. Fantastic. Let's get on with it. I don't know this. September 2001, I don't think exactly. Yes, an interesting day for sure. However, we move come onto our website, you sign an agreement, we'll get the cash to develop a market strategy, and we'll bring it to market. And I thought, do you know what? I think I've heard that somewhere before. So I went, web browser, right. www.seizpower.com, one pane. www.aero2012, another pane. Let's have a look, shall we? Let's do a blink comparator, which is a technique they use in astronomy for detecting comets. Oh look! Aero 2012. Why Aero? An overview for inventors and the historical overview of over-unity electric generators and other unconventional energy innovations shows that for at least 75 years, blah blah blah. Switch to the Seize Power website. Why Seize? An overview for inventors and historical overview of over-unity electric generators, unconventional energy innovations that shows for at least looks like the identical text. And in fact, I looked at the website and those two websites are identical. The only thing that had changed was the logo and the colour scheme. All the same agreements, all the same articles, everything the same. 6 years. All he'd done was given the website a colour makeover. There was no information about what inventions he'd looked at, what had been successful, what had failed, and so on. And I've written this up. There's an article on my website called Something in the Aero, if you want to get more details on that. So Greer posted a 1 or 2 hour presentation, and even in this 1 or 2 hour presentation, Greer did not mention anything. He could have shown a Bedini motor. He could have talked about some of the things I've talked about, many other things that you've been involved with. He didn't talk about that. I don't know if this video is still out there. He said that all these inventors he had in the audience were going to come and speak in this video. They didn't speak in that video. I couldn't find another video where they spoke. And there was no one in that video that we heard from that said anything about what happened with Seize Power. There's no papers being published from it, to my knowledge. Nothing. In 6 years. And then we get people like this, Colonel Tom Bearden and the motionless electric generator. This is another device that you've come across. Now Tom Bearden's a very interesting character. You listen to him and he really does appear to know some stuff. And if you listen to some of his lectures and so forth, it's difficult to understand, but he does appear to know stuff. And this motionless electric generator, which is like an arrangement of coils, which again he claimed you could get more energy out than you put in. I saw a good critique of this, and it doesn't actually appear to work when you actually break it all down. But the critique was very good. I wish I'd saved it because I couldn't find it again. But again, that's one of these devices. It looks as if it has potential, but it doesn't actually appear to work. But why I'm mentioning this is that Tom Bearden made a presentation entitled Scalar Technology and Weather Modification in 1985. 1985. Alright? And he showed this slide at the bottom. It's not very clear here, but he talked about interfering beams of energy. Interfering beams of energy. And I'm thinking, hang on, this is what John Hutchison is doing. This is what happened with the World Trade Center with Hurricane Irene, providing the static field and the apparent microwaving of the people in the towers, 2 energy sources, and the variations in the Earth's magnetic field indicating there was something going on with the magnetic field. That's exactly what Bearden was describing, or maybe not exactly, but something very similar. Something very similar. So you can watch that video, Scalar Technology and Weather Modification, I think it's called, 1985, Tom Bearden, somebody's reposted it. And he talks about Russia having this technology. He said it was the Russians who were modifying the weather at that time. But if you go and read his 2005 book Oblivion, he supports the official story of 9/11. He says Al-Qaeda did it. Tom Bearden, smart guy. He will not talk about Hurricane Irene on 9/11. He will not talk about the destruction of the World Trade Center. Oh yes, one called ADJ UK. It's just the name that I use. I had about 270 videos on there, which I started soon after YouTube started. Posted over a period of about 5 years. Now all that content I can't get because my channel was made inaccessible thanks to 2 copyright violations filed by Energetic Productions LLC. Alright? One of which was filed for a Bedini Motors video that I put on strikes and you're out. So I'd had one from about 2006 or something I posted. I'd taken that clip off. But if you take the clip off, it doesn't stop your copyright violation. So I've had two from Energetic Productions LLC, one about the Bedini Motors clip, which I've previously shown you, and one about this vehicle clip. And I found out that Energetic Productions LLC is the company which backs Chenier.org, which is Tom Bearden's website. It sells the DVDs about Tom Bearden's research. And this is run by a chap called Tony Craddock. And so I found 3 email addresses for Tony Craddock and his company. I emailed him saying, look, I'm sorry you got upset about me posting that 10-minute clip from your 20-year-old video, which is about the video I think is relevant to how the World Trade Center is destroyed. But if if you give me back, if you withdraw your copyright violation, I'll delete that clip for you, and hopefully I can get my other 270 videos back. I sent 3 emails to different addresses. Never heard of the thing. Never heard of the thing. And this guy works with Korea. And guess what? Craddock.biz states that he is founder, president, and CEO of Tony Craddock. He has 40 years' experience in the international petroleum industry. He's marketing these DVDs about Bedini Motors and Tom Bearden.
Right.
And he wouldn't be on my little tiny YouTube channel back. It's just a question of uploading. Let's look at the deaths related to pre-energy research, shall we? Wilhelm Reich, November the 3rd, 1957, found, I'm not sure, I might have got this wrong, I think I might need to change this slide. He was found dead in his prison cell. He was put into prison for contempt of court over the work with the organ accumulators. Bruce De Palma dead in 1997. Stan Meyer dead March 21st, 1998. Dr. Eugene Mallard murdered 17th of May 2004. That was about 3 months after that audio clip that I played on From Coast to Coast. That was recorded in February 2004. Apparently in a burglary which got discovered. Apparently it was his parents' house sorting out for changing over of tenants, and there was a burglary, and Mallard was beaten to death. James Black was also he was a Nobel laureate in 1988 for medicine. He attempted to sue the US-Canadian government over their actions against John Hutchison's research, and he was found on his bed in his apartment. The autopsy described it as a natural death, a possible heart attack. At the time of his death, he was 51 years old. He was born on 21st November 1951. Perfect health. He's never had any heart problems. Ari M. de Geus, he was dead on November the 11th, 2007. Inventor of a revolutionary self-powering battery of AMDG Scientific Corps, was fined, slumped to his car, totally unresponsive, a long-term parking of the Charlotte Airport, I think it is. And here we have another tragic link to what has been going on here. Dr. Eugene Mallard worked with another chap called William Zabur on the New Energy Research Foundation. And William Zabur had a nephew, the name was Michael Zabur, and he was murdered in a mugging on March the 19th, 2006. Michael Zabur was Dr. Genie Wood's student. They were putting together information about 9/11. Death in New Zealand in October 1997 put an end to his most ambitious free energy project and occurred only weeks prior to the official testing of a device constructed during 6 months in an Auckland workshop. This test was attended by, among others, the project's financial backer, Bruce Bornhold, a prominent Walter barrister, as well as the pioneer and developer of the Adams motor. Robert Adams, now deceased, who observed the operation of and measured electrical output from the end machine. The test demonstrated no over-unity potential of the end machine, and most of the output was lost as heat, and the project was abandoned. Careful if you're using plastic projector, please. Stan Meyer's death. After more than 20 years of research and tinkering, Stanley Allen Meyer, his brother and 2 Belgian investors raised glasses in Grove City, Cracker Barrel on March 20th, 1998. He took a sip of cranberry juice, then he grabbed his neck, bolted out the door, dropped to his knees, vomited violently. I ran outside and asked him, "What's wrong?" Stephen called this is his brother. He said, "They poisoned me." And that was his dying declaration. So again, it ended. His research never went forward from that point. If Stephen Meyer was shocked by his twin brothers' collapse and death, he was equally amazed at the Belgian response to the next day. These were the people who were meant to be these investors. I told them that Stan had died, and they never said a word. He recalled absolutely nothing. No condolences, no questions. I never ever had a trust in those two men ever again. It was his goal. So,
Фабрика, не нужна фабрика.
How do we get access to free energy devices?
О, прекрасно.
Well, this YouTube posting, I think, found some comment on YouTube. This was a pretty good summary. I like summaries. Stan Meyer and many others, always the same story. The Pentagon wants to see your idea and tell you how they would like to use your invention. You demonstrate your device, proving to them that it works, which is what a lot of these people have done. They then block all your efforts and end up killing you. The only way to get a free energy device is to forget about patents, distribute it underground, sell it to EV enthusiasts with plans and encourage them to travel around and do as you are, and then you have created a non-interlinked underground distribution system that will spread to the general populace, and it will spread like wildfire. It will be unstoppable. So we've got to do this thing underground. So we need people with these skills to build machinery. But it's one thing to build a device, but then to engineer it into a system that will run 24/7. That's a different issue. As I see it, the problem is that if you want to get to something that you can keep making big quantities, you need a factory. To have a factory, you need money to build the factory. And then once you get investment in that, you then attract attention to your project. You've got to get through health and safety regulations. You've got to get through tax, regulations. So the authorities will get to know about what you're doing, and that's when they shut you down. That's when they'll either send in the lawyers, or they'll freeze all your bank accounts somehow, or they'll come out with some dirt to stop you earning a living. Whatever they can do, and if those things don't work, they'll kill you. That's the situation that we're in. But the biggest thing, which the free energy movement won't talk about, and I'll prove that it won't talk about, is this, which you saw yesterday and Friday. Just a very quick 2 or 3 slides. This is a new technology at work. This is energy technology which the people that Eisenhower was referring to, the secret group, whoever they are, they know about this. Where did the buildings go? They were turned to dust in 20 seconds. 10 seconds each, less than that. I'm not going to go through all of this. No appreciable heat. Stan Meyer's cell, no appreciable heat. Cold fusion, very little heat. Unburned paper. What technology can do this? What kind of destruction can happen like this with no appreciable heat? NIST produced 10,000 pages of technical reports about the destruction of the World Trade Center, right? 2 companies that were involved in the production of those reports are Science Applications International Corporation and Applied Research Associates. They do research and development in, guess what, directed energy weapons. Yet they helped write the NIST reports. You can go on again research that further. Stephen Greer knows about SAIC. If you read his book on disclosure, I think 2 of the witnesses that he interviewed mentioned SAIC as a big benefactor of the black budget. Nobody knew where this money, millions of dollars, were given to SAIC. Millions of dollars. Bobby Ray Inman, who Greer talks about, was the director of SAIC. Time to play the audio clip, nearly out of time. last year in Amsterdam, Richard Hoagland presented Dr. Judy Wood's research for an hour and a half in his presentation. And I don't want to read all the text out because we're running out of time, but basically he got a lot of things wrong. He never contacted Dr. Judy Wood before the presentation. He used a picture from one of my booklets that I've created, never even contacted me. I don't mind him using the picture, but he never contacted me to ask me about that. This was the slide that he used from something that's on my website. But in 2008, Richard Hoagland was talking about the revolution in solar power, and he said, what was the biggest single reason why Bin Laden ostensibly killed 3,000 Americans? He said that, Richard Hoagland did, in 2008. Yet last year he spent an hour and a half talking about Dr. Judy Wood's research and getting very important details wrong, by the way. I've written a whole article about that. It's in my book, 9/11 Finding the Truth. I won't play it because we're running out of time. I've got the audio clips to prove that this is what he actually said, and I'm not just making it up. So Judy's question, which is exquisitely logical, this is from Hoagland, where did these things go? So far she hasn't got an answer. Hoagland was claiming that Dr. Judy didn't have an answer to these questions. That's what he claimed in his presentation in Amsterdam last year. Here's the mystery of melted steel, he says. There's no melted steel. Now, back to my own experiences. This is me. And a few other people you might recognise. David Griffin, Richard Dolan, myself, Lloyd Pye, Nick Pope, and Ian Crane. Nick Pope parrots the official story of 9/11 100%. Richard Dolan, I met him in that lecture, obviously, discussed in some detail Dr. Judy Wood's research, including Hurricane Erin and the Hudson effect. Richard Dolan has written about black technology, black projects, breakaway civilization, and in September 2009, during a 77-minute podcast, he discussed 9/11, but only referred to a peer-reviewed paper about nanothermite. And this was 3 months after I met him and put personally in his hand the information about Hurricane Erin. And I think I probably mentioned to him these things about science applications and international cooperation. In this 77-minute broadcast, he never even mentioned that he'd met me. He never mentioned the hurricane. He never mentioned John Hutchison. He never mentioned energy. All he said was that nanothermite is totally integrated with itself, and that's what was used to destroy the towers, according to this paper that was being done by these physicists. And again, I've written about that paper as well. He refers to it. Yeah, so I've got all that text. That's the text from what he actually said, and I've got the audio clip nearly up to time. Yeah, so various things that he said, again, he got them wrong. But Judy, this one... Okay, so I've got various audio clips. Right, so I just want to finish up with this. We're hostages to the technology which destroyed the World Trade Center. What we can see when we... this is from the UK. We've reduced our fuel emissions. That's a lorry load off your mind. They've made it streamlined. This is Marks and Spencer's. This is what we get. This is what we get. This rubbish about climate change, and it's all a scam. Cancer, it's a scam. Energy, it's a scam. All of it. It's all a scam. They create a mindset by putting all this rubbish out in the media and creating these mindsets that we're then imprisoned in.
Вот есть вот и все, который сложно добывается. Можно позвать? Да, только сюда.
take this one, folks.
Our projections show that by the year 2025, not only America, but the entire planet will be under the protection and the dominion of this power alliance. The gains have been substantial, both for ourselves and for you, the human power elite. You have given us entree to the resources we need in our ongoing quest for multidimensional expansion. And in return, the per capita income of each of you here tonight has grown, in this year alone, by an average 39%. And I've just received word that our forces have won a major victory. The underground terrorist network has been destroyed here on the West Coast. We are off crisis alert. The situation is normal again.
How you doing, boys? Welcome aboard. You boys really should have dressed for the party. Now you can afford it. Sure, I'm proud to be here. You seen the whole place? Come on, I'll show you around. You know, I knew me and you had a lot in common. First time we met. Hey, waiter.
Это только навигационные данные.
Excuse me. Well, hello. Backstage at the show, boys. I'll admit it is a little funky, but it serves its purpose. How'd you get here? It's one of these little portable jobs. I know we ain't supposed to use them except in cases of emergency, but there's so much fun. Now, you think that's something? Take a look at this. Come on, take a closer look.
Attention commuters. Flight Alpha 7 to Andromeda is now for boarding. Please step into transition platform. All carry-on luggage must be held securely. Thank you for waiting, and we hope you have a pleasant trip.
Exactly, but it has to do with some sort of gravitational lens deal, bending a light or some damn thing. But you can move from place to place, world to world if you want to. You see, the whole thing here works like one big airport. Boys, let me tell you, they got their act together. Believe you me.
They've got their act together, believe you me. There is some group stopping us from having free energy. We need to be aware of that. I don't know who they are, he's given various names, but this is very important that we're aware of them. We map them out. We want to move this forward. This is something people don't talk about a lot. Eisenhower, as I started off the presentation, he knew this. He knew this 50 years ago. So that's this website there, but I just really like to close with saying thank you so much for listening, and I'll take questions probably privately one-to-one because we've run out of time, but I'd like to quote John Lear because I like what he says. He says that if you can learn to live and live without envy, hate or greed and love your family, then if you move forward with those thoughts, well, we might get somewhere. Thank you very much indeed.
Tom Bearden, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, retired. Spent 20 years, a little more than that, in the active military. Mostly in air defense, various other assignments for artillery, technical intelligence assignments, liaison to the academy to some technical work alongside turbine wakes and energy systems and so forth at research and development establishment. And spent quite a number of tours in basic missile systems and things like that. For about 20 years or more, some associates and I have been researching very heavily into trying to extract electromagnetic energy from the vacuum. Now, we did so under somewhat duress because the conventional electrodynamics model does not allow this to happen. In other words, it doesn't allow you to extract excess energy from the vacuum and use that to power your load. So it doesn't allow you to make a self-powering system. So we took the approach that some of the phenomenology we had seen in experiments and so forth convinced us that it was possible, and there didn't seem to be any real physical reason why it couldn't be extracted if we could find a way to do it. But we had the problem of why doesn't the electrodynamics allow it to be done? So at the same time, we also began a study of the foundations of electronics. In other words, what are the fundamental concepts that are assumed in the theory? Where did they come from? And how did they get in there? And that turned out to be very interesting and very pertinent because electrodynamics kept getting modified. And restricted is what kept happening to it. The original theory that Maxwell had was 20 equations and 20 unknowns, quaternion type equations. What we've done is the closed current loop circuit where all the carriers have the same mass per charge ratio. All the buckets have the same weight, so to speak. Anytime you build a circuit like that, it's quite easy to show that the amount of energy that circuit collects when we do this free regauging and we do increase its energy, ever how much it collects, it will then use precisely 50% of that to destroy the thing that let it do that. It's really the dipole, the source dipole. It will use that to kill itself, so to speak, and have no more excess energy. The other half will go out to the circuit and power the loads and losses. That means less than half gets to the load. Well, to restore that source dipole, in other words, so we can get some more energy in to use, it costs just as much to restore it as was used to destroy it. So we got to put in more than we can ever get out in the load with such a squirrely circuit. And that's the only kind of circuit we've used in power systems since day one. We're still building them. We're still making power systems that deliberately killed them. So we pay the power company to have a giant wrestling match inside his generator and lose. That's really what we pay them for. So that doesn't seem to be the way to run a railroad. It would seem to be much more ideal to freely change the energy of the system, pay a little switching cost so we get it switched over to the load and dump it in the load and let it go, let it power the load. And so you can do it. So the problem we ran into was that the electrodynamics had actually been modified to throw out the very kind of systems that we had seen in our experiments, evidence that could be done, but violates the ordinary electrodynamics. And we can do it and not violate conservation of energy. We can do it in accord with thermodynamics, and we can do it in accord with physics and electromagnetics. Now this is absolutely rigorous. I don't care how many folks want to check that, it will hold up. It is rigorous. So this was one thing we established from the study of the foundations of electromagnetics. You are permitted to have electromagnetic systems that power themselves and their load, and you don't have to put in the energy. They take it from the vacuum, the active vacuum. Our engineers are taught to throw away about 10 trillion times for a typical average case as much energy as they pull out of the vacuum without even knowing it in a generator and a battery. And it's pouring out down the circuit and misses the circuit. They throw all that away and only calculate a little bit that we catch in that circuit and use. Now, when we measure the circuit,
we obviously measure the energy being dissipated by the various pieces of that circuit. Well, if the energy is being thrown out of there, it had to get in there. So obviously the measurements of the circuit will match Poynting's theory because it'll match the energy that actually went in there to get dissipated. Like the country boy said, you got a pipe here, so to speak, and it's got some holes in it. If you measure all the water flowing out, that's how much water come in it. Now, your whole river can be around it and missing the pipe, and you won't measure that. So we have built a whole science based on throwing away this enormous energy that is pulled out of the vacuum by every little old separation of charges, every dipole. Well, in the 50s, in 1950s, particle physicists discovered, Wu and others discovered broken symmetry. They discovered how fundamental a process something like this dipole is, where we separate two opposite kinds of charges. And T.D. Lee, for example, looked at it for physical charges and so forth, and Lee won a Nobel Prize.
Можно произвести светодиоды.
Any dipole is a broken symmetry in the Furious exchange with a vacuum. It's a broken three-dimensional symmetry. What does this mean? Cutting through all the words, getting down to country boy language. It means that nature does not insist on conserving energy in three dimensions. We do because we have a three-dimensional mind. We like to think in terms of space because observation itself destroys time, and what we look at is spatial. So we like to think the world is made of space, not space-time. However, nature loves to work in four dimensions. Her fundamental law is conservation of energy must apply in four dimensions. Now, you're not going to beat that one, so never think about that. But there is no law of nature that requires you to come in and say, also it must apply simultaneously in three dimensions. If we build some gadget that makes it apply in three dimensions, we apply an extra constraint on what nature will give us. Turning that around, we go around building things that insist on having this three-dimensional exchange of energy. We got to put it in three dimensions for whatever we get out and lose some in the middle. So we got a terrible situation all the way. It's called entropic engineering. We always got entropy beating us to death. Never go over unity. Forget it. Lose a lot. We talk about, efficiencies at 30% and so forth for our power systems when we talk about burning the coal and all that stuff. But nature doesn't require you to do that. All you have to do is break a little bit of this three symmetry set of chains where you have tied her feet to the floor. Once you break the flow in three dimensions, you no longer have to conserve energy in three dimensions. The basic conservation of energy is an inflow from four dimensions, outflow in three dimensions. From the fourth dimension, converted and flowed out into three. And that one is free. Giant negentropy is free. Nature will start reorganizing a goodly percentage of the whole vacuum for you, spreading at the speed of light, and will continue it as long as you leave the dipole alone. The original charges and dipoles in the original matter of the universe have been putting out energy and reorganizing the vacuum for 15 billion years. Today we're said we can't engineer negentropy when negentropy is the easiest thing in the world to engineer, whereas entropy is the hard way to do it, and that's the way we all do it. The bottom line of this is if we'll initiate the negative entropy and let it go, it's just like you punched a hole in the ground and you got a big gusher of oil. You don't have to furnish the pressure and you don't have to furnish the oil. Here it comes. And it comes out in real oil that you can use. And the common dipole in every electrical circuit pours out energy in that fashion. The problem is not how to get enormous energy from the vacuum. That problem is totally solved. It was actually solved in 1903 had we understood it. Had we understood what Whittaker wrote. We didn't. But now we do understand it, and we do certify very rigorously with some of the AIS papers that that is for real. The problem now is how do we catch a goodly bit of this energy and use it asymmetrically, dump it in a load, let it power that load, and not use half of it to go back over and kill that little dipole. So we set about then to build one that wasn't built that way. Yes, we have been successful. We have just built our second model. The first model produced 5 times out what we put in. We pay for switch energy into it to actually power the system. It comes right out of a permanent magnet, which is a dipole. The reason for using a permanent magnet is very simple. You can pass the flux back in a flux channel back through the permanent magnet, and those poles get destroyed. They are welded into the material. That's not like little charges separated in electrical charges. You knock the charges out and destroy the dipole. So we can bypass one of the big problems with a permanent magnet. We don't have to destroy the dipole. That gives us one solution going in. The other is, how do we catch the energy? Well, that turned out to be fairly simple. We found a material which will separate the magnetic field from what's called the magnetic vector potential. But the vector potential flows unceasingly from the magnet. It'll flow from now for the next 15 billion years. You can't slow it down. You can't change it as long as that magnet is there. So you have plenty of energy flow. The question is how to use it. So we use it by diversion. We reason that this flow will replenish. It's like a river. It's like a humongous river. If we dip some energy out of it, it'll replenish the hole we dipped out of at the speed of light. So for all practical purposes, instantly. So we can dip and dip and dip. We have to pay the switch to do that. But we can keep dipping, and the water fills as fast as we dip it. Then if we come down to another area and we let the water that was replenished still interact with something, and at the same time we dump the water that we dipped in there, we will have more energy by far than what we're paying for dipping. So we looked at it as an energy flow process, which it is. And we found a material which would do part of the dipping for us. It will separate the magnetic field from the magnetic vector potential. Yes, there is a history, a long history of over-unity systems. For example, Nikola Tesla had one. Basically, his big magnifying transformer that he had in Long Island was such an over-unity system. The way that one apparently worked is he got the entire Earth itself. The crust of the Earth, as you go down in there, is made of highly nonlinear materials, particularly when you get down to the perovskite or whatever you call that stuff. And it will act in the bulk. It will interact in sort of a nonlinear operates fashion. It will do phase conjugation. And so eventually what it does is everything going on is feeding energy into the Earth starts to feed energy into that wave accreting. So it gets a lot more energy in this. Fed from outside, from the environment in the interior of the Earth. And that's the way he built up a humongous wave of energy. His idea was he could then put in a tap anywhere else on the world and extract it free. Of course, taking orders, take on that. That's foolish. You can't put a meter on it. So that actually doomed much of Tesla's career at that point. Before we found out that Tesla was going to produce the energy free. Small cost here at a central location. Everybody else could take it for free. It wouldn't have powered the whole world today. It would have powered much of the world in those days. Tesla also, pretty sure, put a system in a car and ran a car. And the reason for sure his nephew who rode in the car is still alive and can describe the incident and how the engine had no gas when they put it power and would still run once Tesla got started. And we know it's perfectly possible Tesla apparently knew how to use this giant negative process. It's universal energy free to take it in the vacuum anywhere you want it. Just some of the breakthroughs in the past have been delivered to was inspired, of course, by Tesla's work. And he demonstrated so many times to so many scientific groups who were skilled in the art. There is absolutely no question that T. Henry Morley had a system that produced about 50 kilowatts out of 55 watts. This is well established if you go back and look at all kinds of certified tests and everything else that he did. There's all kinds of skullduggery that happened there. I don't think T. Henry Morley ever got a decent chance to ever do anything with that.
Russians even tried to kidnap him at one time. It reads like a James Bond movie, but it's real. It really happened, and it really happened here in the United States. This was before the war. This was in the 1930s. The same general period of time, one of the greatest electromagnetic fellows we ever had, scientists, was Gabriel Crone. Gabriel Crone invented a true negative resistor working on a Navy contract at Stanford University. He was never permitted to reveal the exact way that he constructed his negative resistor. But I used direct quotes where he, in fact, said we have a negative resistor and we can disconnect the generator from this network analyzer when we got negative resistors in there because they will power the circuit. So that one was, in fact, suppressed. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it vanished. And he never did reveal the secret of what he called his open path, connecting any 2 points in a circuit. But it is in the literature, and it's well documented because he was one of, perhaps the leading electrical scientist in the United States at that time. So there's another one that went down the tube. Various and sundry people have made casual ones from time to time over the years. I'd estimate probably 50 different inventors have casually invented something. Even if they didn't understand it, they did get it to go over Unity. We're never able to get anything done with it. Most of the time, they incurred a lot of enmity from the scientific community. Sometimes we're really hounded. And sometimes we're just very naive. Probably the best documented scientifically over Unity systems, self-running, self-powering systems, were developed by the Russians before World War II. It's in the French scientific literature, and it's also in the Russian scientific literature. The papers are there. I quote them in many of the things that I published. And you can go check the papers. The theory is there. Many papers are published on this in the Russian scientific literature. They built what we call parametric oscillators. They have an oscillator going and they change in the middle, they switch the actual inductance or capacitance or both of the thing so that it becomes a self-oscillation device. And they reached, goodly power for those days, 1,500 kilowatt devices. There are many ways of looking at suppression that's occurred in this area. Certainly, I do not wish to talk about it myself, but I've been a victim of quite a bit of suppression. So has any other legitimate researcher in this area. All I can do is give you my ideas and draw from my own experiences and what I think it is and where I think it's coming from. Today, we don't have so much big kingdoms. Today, we have big economic programs, economic countries. Basically, we have cartels. We have a set of cartels in the area and a lot of corporations. And behind this, we have a few people who are quite wealthy and all of those things. Now, the normal nature of the beast for very powerful empires, let's call that an empire, it's a corporate empire, a set of corporations, empire, is basically a cartel. Historically, as far back as you want to go, we've had cartels. Any time we have a very powerful cartel, a set of people that control a lot of things, that is its inflow of control, its inflow of funds and money, and its power. Everybody's trying to be big money. It's really as simple as that. And so, the more powerful the agency, the more powerful the group, the more powerful the cartel, the more they will resort not only to legal means, but to extra legal means to suppress their competition. This is openly known today. For example, the greatest espionage in the world is industrial espionage between one corporation and another right here in America. They're the ones that hire all the spies and the spooky equipment and everything like that, by far more than the intel agents do. So that's one thing we have. We have the giant industrial, or really cartel, economic cartels in energy. And it's not one cartel. So there are many, many groups in energy. And each of those has become very powerful in its own area, and each one does not wish to see simple little electrical taps pulling out enormous energy from the vacuum. They would much rather see you burning a lot more oil and so forth. So, yes, in my view, there is a very active suppression effort by those kinds of folks. Part of that goes into very unique areas. They don't do it so much It's not totally mafia type stuff. It's not like, you know, you just flat get shot. There's some of that. But one of the main ways of suppressing it is they take a deep psychological profile of an individual that they wish to suppress. What it means is they really wish to get him entangled in all kinds of difficulties he can't get out of. Now, a good trait from a human being standpoint may be a very valuable trait to somebody who wishes to manipulate you. For example, suppose you're easy to approach. That's a vulnerability. That's a serious vulnerability. So, one's deep psychological profile is examined in great depth by real experts. And any way that you can be gotten to where you're naive, you don't have who knows international finance? You can be had on a money laundering scheme easily and not even recognize that's what you're in. So any way that you do not have good knowledge, or you do not have ability, or you have a vulnerability, they call them vulnerabilities, then they arrange scenarios just like you would write a movie. In fact, they do it with computers, all computerized. And in this scenario, we write a play where this particular vulnerability is going to be exploited in the target. Now, they keep deep psychological profiles on lots of useful fellows. These are people who basically have knee-jerk reactions or something, or they're radical, or they have some kind of way they interact, which, if could be connected with you, would be in the area we wish the interaction to occur, which you all think something else over here. So the next thing you know, all it takes to set that up may be a phone call and stimulate the interaction to occur. And then the controllers sit back and watch the game go. It's games, but it's just like watching a movie scenario. One of these days, we'll probably write a book on gaming and how it's done and